compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, known as Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of New Jersey, 1975. Notice of this meeting was given by adopting an annual schedule of the location, time, and date, sending copies to the Home News Tribune and the Star Ledger, posting in Borough Hall, and filing a copy with the Borough Clerk within 7 days following the annual organizational meeting of this body. Sharon, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Borth?
Here.
Mrs. Bush?
Here.
Mrs. Clarkson?
Here.
Mr. Grossman?
Here.
Mr. Jessen? Mr. Leefried?
Here.
Mayor Valhalla?
Here.
Councilman Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Hirsch?
Here.
Mr. Curran?
Here.
Mr. Erickson?
Here. Declare quorum present. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. All board members, do me a favor, take your microphones and lower them to where you see mine. And keep them there for the duration of the meeting. Do not move them up. When we move them up, members of the public can't hear us. And we want to be heard for this meeting and for the purpose of the recording of this meeting. So everyone, if you would, keep them there stationary. Do not move them up. If you need to mute your microphone, there's a button on it, but otherwise, keep them in this position so everyone can hear us. To the members of the public, the way we're going to work this meeting this evening is that normally we have public input at the end of the meeting after all professionals have testified, but tonight we have so many professionals testifying that what we're going to do is allow the public to ask questions of these professionals as they speak individually. Now, as you can see, we have a full house and a lot of people who want to share their thoughts with us. So what I'm going to ask you is that so that the maximum and hopefully amount of people and hopefully everybody who wants to ask questions and share their thoughts, in order to facilitate that keep in mind that we have many witnesses and many people who want to speak. So I'm going to ask you, to the extent practicable, to focus your narrative and your questions as directly and succinctly as possible so that the largest number of people can get to share their thoughts and questions with the board. It's the board's practice not to entertain new testimony after 11 p.m. Everybody knows that, but I'll state it for the record just as a reiterant. And other than that, council, anything else?
No, I think we're ready to go, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then we can proceed with new business this evening, which is Woodmont Metuchen LLC and Pearl Street Parking Facility. Applicant is seeking preliminary and final site plan approval and major subdivision approval for the construction of residential apartments, commercial retail space, a public piazza, and a public parking garage.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public. My name is Jennifer Mazaway. I'm a partner with Nova Burns, G. and Tomasi Webster in Newark. And I'm pleased to be here this evening before the board on behalf of the applicants Woodmont Metuchen LLC and Pearl Street Parking Facility LLC. We are here this evening regarding Block 115, Lot 36, and Block 111.01, Lots 30, 31, 32, and 33. As the chair mentioned, we are seeking preliminary and final major subdivision approval from the board this evening. We're seeking to merge the 5 lots and then subdivide into 3 lots, which would be proposed lots Block 115, lots 36.01, 36.02, and 36.03. We're also seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval this evening. And what we're planning on doing is a transit-oriented development in the downtown, transforming the existing 100% impervious surface parking lot that's owned by the Parking Authority into a downtown development with a 1/2 acre public piazza, mixed-use buildings with rental and retail and dining options for the public, and an approximately 753 space parking garage. The site is located in the D1 downtown district in the planned unit commercial development overlay zone. The site and amenities that we are proposing this evening are consistent with the elements contained in the PUCD, and you'll hear testimony about that tonight. Notice of tonight's hearing was published in the July 4th edition of the Home News Tribune and was mailed to all property owners located within 200 feet of the subject properties. An affidavit of proof of service and publication has previously been provided to the board secretary. You will hear from a number of witnesses tonight, both fact witnesses and expert witnesses, including professional engineers, traffic engineer, architect, landscape architect, and planner. But I'd like to start this evening with our owner's representative, Stephen Santola, who may be known to many in the public and to this board as he's been involved in the project for a number of years. Stephen's the Executive Vice President and General Counsel for Woodmont Properties, and he'll introduce further some of the members of our team and will provide some factual testimony on the project. So with that, I'm going to start with Mr. Simple.
Please right in. I swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth.
I do.
Witnesses been sworn, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And if you would state your full name for the record.
My name is Stephen Santola. I'm Executive Vice President and General Counsel with Woodmont Properties, 100 Passaic Avenue in Fairfield, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, first I'd obviously like to thank you and all the board for making yourselves available in July for a couple of special meetings so we can move forward with what we all know is a very exciting project for Metuchen. Let me start out by saying, and at the risk of making it seem as though I'm blowing a little sunshine in you, we get the opportunity to do this in different municipalities, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And I have to tell you that we really like it. This is a wonderful community. This project has been a true public-private partnership, an expression that I'm uncomfortable with because it's so overused. But starting at the top with the mayor and Jay Muldoon, who we work closely with as the parking authority representative, to Len Roseman and Jim Graziano and the entire parking authority and the entire council, the administrator Bill Barth, it has been an excellent experience. Honesty, mean what you say what you mean, speak the truth, and we all move forward together. We've had the opportunity, obviously, to get to know the American Legion folks pretty closely, as well as a number of other groups in town. And no introduction would be complete without the mention of Jim Constantine. We were joking around before, and I was saying I feel like I don't have a daughter, but if I had a daughter, I get the sense that nobody would be good enough to marry my daughter. Well, Jim has that feeling about this project. But I think over time, Woodmont has managed to win his heart. And we have convinced him, I believe, that we're the right folks, along with our good partners Nexus, to move this project forward. Jim brings a passion to this that all of you, I hope, have a lot of respect for, because I think it goes way beyond the hours that he works and bills. He loves this. So I do want you to know that what you're going to see this evening has been the result of a very careful and deliberative process over the 18 months. Any number of meetings with folks around town, professionals, visiting other downtown sites, and working together to come up with what we have. Just briefly, and I know all of you know a little bit about Woodmont, but we do have a specialty in downtown redevelopment, from Morristown to Cranford to South Amboy to Red Bank. All of these communities are either complete or in some form of construction. So we understand some of the nuances of how to pick up the garbage and where the noise is going to be and what streetlights might be in somebody's window while we're trying to sleep and those types of issues. And we work very hard to try and overcome all of them. We have a great partner who you're going to hear from tonight in the folks from Nexus. They've been running the garages at Metro Park, Hamilton, all over New Jersey. These guys even know more about parking than Len Rosen, which is hard to imagine. But they get it, and they were outstanding to work with, and I think we make a nice team. One of the nice things about doing a project like this is it's a big parking lot. It's generating lots and lots of traffic in your community, really with not too many other benefits. Maybe somebody stops at the local pharmacy on the way home. But there's a lot of folks coming in and out of town at the AM and PM peak. So we're not taking an old closed down warehouse or a building that hasn't been in service for years and years and years and introducing all this activity. In fact, what we're doing, and we have some traffic testimony to this point, is it's really traffic neutral, but we're getting all of these other advantages. The tax base, the exciting new retail, all of the shoppers who will be coming into the downtown, eating and drinking and having fun and spending their money here, as well as the purchase price, which is not insignificant, to the parking authority for the land. We'll also be creating literally hundreds of construction jobs along the way and a host of permanent jobs as we go forward, not only with folks that will be full-time managing and so on in our part of the community, but also all the folks working in the retail and so on. And just to demonstrate to you the level of commitment we have, we're on the agenda, I believe, with the council in August to transfer a liquor license in Metuchen that's currently not in use because we really see this piazza and this retail that you're going to be exposed to as a great place for outdoor dining and a nice restaurant, bar environment. So we're already out there making investments on the hopes that we're able to move forward here quickly. Just a short note, because I don't think we're going to cover too much. With regard to all of my communities, a few quickies. First of all, you'll see the amenities package with our architect, Keith Campbell. We've actually flown in from Chicago to be here tonight. High amenities package. Every community is pet friendly. We welcome dogs. We're all dog owners, and we love dogs. There will be full-time management that lives on site in the building. So if somebody's faucet's leaking or toilet's broken at 2 o'clock in the morning, they won't be calling you, Mayor. You'll be happy to know. They'll have a direct line right to our on-site super. We'll also, during the day, probably have as many as 3 or 4 full-time employees that are showing apartments to possible new residents, as well as managing the overall community, making sure the amenities stay 150%. So we have lots of witnesses. This whole side of the room, I think, is here with us. I don't want to take up any more time, but obviously I may jump up every now and then if there's a question that's very specific to our operations or our company. So if you see me again, Mr. Renato, I'll certainly understand I'm still under it.
Very good.
We'd like to call Keith Campbell.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding?
I do.
Witnesses have been sworn. Would you just state your full name for the record?
I apologize. Steve, you forgot to do this. 1 second. Most of the pages that are in the book are and we'll want one of those. So most of those are part of the PowerPoint. We saved a few trees and left a few pages out of the PowerPoint for the book, but this way you'll be able to really have something in front of you that you can look at a little bit closer, and it'll follow pretty closely.
At the tone that we have a microphone somewhere there that witnesses can be used to speak into so everyone can hear.
Right, you have to speak.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, we're going to mark, council, hopefully we'll have enough sets. We'll mark them as A1, so
Now, while this witness has appeared before this board and we know his qualifications, I'm going to ask him just to repeat them again for us so that we can accept him as an expert.
My name is Keith Campbell. I'm the Vice President at RTKL Associates in Chicago, address 200 South Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois.
And Mr. Campbell, you've appeared before boards like this and have professional certifications and so on and so forth. Why don't you share those with us just briefly?
Okay. I have worked in New Jersey before, including with Woodmont Properties, as well as Roseland Properties, projects in Livingston, New Jersey, Morristown, New Jersey, and Weehawken. I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects, as well as the Urban Land Institute.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us, and you can proceed.
Okay, so a few of you have heard me describe their design solution before a little bit, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time reiterating a lot of information you might have heard before, but I just want to maybe remind everyone of a few of the design principles that we were looking at when we started our concept design.
Mr. Campbell, I'm sorry, I don't think you should truncate your presentation. Everybody on the board hasn't heard it, and neither has the public, so, I would say explain the project.
Sure.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the four maybe design guiding principles that we started with were that we are designing an urban design solution, not just designing 2 buildings and a parking deck. And part of an urban design solution means that we consider the spaces between the buildings as just as important as the buildings themselves. We're not attempting to force an unfamiliar or unlikely architectural solution on the site. We're drawing from the community, from what we've seen in Metuchen before, from adjacent properties. We like to think that we're designing not just within the property line, but outside the property line as well. And maybe most importantly, we're using architectural and urban design principles that have been proven for years, sometimes for centuries. A couple of slides to start with. We're calling inspiration. It's maybe a combination of inspiration and some examples of materials. Over on the left, a nice example in Livingston of a combination of red brick, cast stone as a trim piece up here, white painted trim. That's a design language that we see a lot in Metuchen. Over on the right is an example of a material that we intend to use as a composite panel. It can be painted, it can be integrally colored. It integrates well with red brick, as you see on the corner here. One of the things that we've been looking at carefully is the tops of the buildings and the cornice lines. And given the size and the nature and the height of the buildings, cornices are important. We think the dimensions that we see here in this picture are appropriate, anywhere from 12, 15, maybe 18 inches in projection depth. In the center, you'll see a piazza. This is actually in Italy. It's hard not to like this one, but what it shows is the kind of simplicity that we'd like to see in the piazza in Metuchen. Simple but high-quality paving materials, combination of potted plants and a little bit more mature growth on the walls of the buildings. An informal kind of seating arrangement. You see outdoor diners outside of retail and restaurant storefronts. And up above, slightly projecting residential balcony that looks over the public space. We have all those things in our proposed design. A little more inspiration up on the upper left, buildings that we're in, which we admire. Nice example of red brick, carefully detailed masonry, projecting white trim, nice deep cornice up there, a nice keystone at the top of each arch, white windows and mullion bars. It's a good precedent. Again, another example of the integration of private and public spaces. This is a projecting private balcony overlooking the public space, and you'll see in our drawings we have a number of examples like that. On the right is a landscape trellis. A big part of our design is an outdoor space above retail, and we're proposing a landscape trellis not unlike this one on the right. Over on the lower left is another example of a very successful public space. It doesn't try too hard to do too many things, which is why we like it. Nice low planting here within the planters, some mature trees providing shade, simple but high quality paving materials underfoot. It hasn't been over-designed. It allows for a lot of simplicity, and what simplicity allows is a lot of flexibility. So the piazza can be used a number of different ways depending on the event. And lastly, this picture on the right shows an example of ground floor residential units adjacent to a sidewalk. We've got that situation on both east and west buildings in our design solution. It's actually a positive benefit to the public space. But exterior patios like this need to be protected, and what we're proposing is a solution not unlike this picture, which protects that patio space with a low masonry knee wall, maybe a little wrought iron on top, and some extra foundation planting that softens the transition between sidewalk and public space, or private space, I'm sorry. So our site plan is consistent with what we originally designed in the concept package with a few improvements. What we're calling Woodmont Way here, the extension of Center Street, has been made a little bit more compact. We've added residential units in the west building that actually comes over and touches the parking garage. As I mentioned, it makes this a better space. It has a little bit more containment to it. But it has a great benefit to the west building in that every tenant, both west building and east building, now has the opportunity to access their floor via swipe cards directly from the parking gate. I mentioned the ground floor units that happen in this corner here in the east building on New Street, as well as west building, turn the corner, and down Lake Street. So you'll see a small projection outside the building footprint there that represents these outdoor patios with a small, low masonry wall with a little landscape border on the outside. This corner, of course, is our piazza space, lined on two sides with shallow retail, an appropriate amount of retail, about a total of around 12,400 square feet. That's important for any public space to have a certain amount of retail activity, liveliness that activates the space. I mentioned that both buildings touch the parking garage and provide access to all the units. There are private courtyards in both the east building and the west building. The west is a little larger, and so it allows room for a private swimming pool in the center here. Access to the parking deck is off of either Woodmont Way here or off of Pearl Street. Both east and west buildings have their lobby space facing each other. There'll be a drop-off area, protected canopy for both buildings, and the ability to turn around the end of Woodmont Way if you're not parking. As we go up in height, the building footprints are stayed consistent pretty much all the way. Of course, the west building is only 4 levels, east building 5 levels, so the west building drops off after 4. But otherwise, the stacking of the units stays pretty much consistent. The retail building, the standalone retail building here has an extra high floor-to-floor height, which is what that X indicates, allowing a special use that might require a different height than the typical retail space. The only real consistent difference in floor plans is that at the 3rd level, we're providing an amenity space off of the east building. You'll see it here. It's probably going to be a fitness room for the residents. We love having it in that location. It does a number of great things for us. So specifically, it shares a rooftop terrace that overlooks the piazza landscape terrace. That's where our landscape trellis will be. So you get this sort of layering of uses: residential units, fitness club, and then outdoor amenity space, all overlooking the piazza. The 5th floor is where the top floor of the east building is. It's 1 level higher than the west building. We have a total of 273 units across the entire project, 41 COA units, and the rest market rate. Building heights, east building 58 feet to the top of structure, west building 47 feet to the top of structure. Both buildings have a decorative parapeted cornice that hasn't been pinned down exactly yet, but probably 4 to 5 feet. That does a number of things for us, including screening any mechanical units that are on the roof. Okay, so this shot is right at the corner of New Street and Pearl Street, looking directly into the piazza. Has a number of great attributes for public space. You'll notice the paving pattern. I'm going to have the landscape architect from Melillo and Bauer talk about that in more detail, but what you'll notice is that it has a pattern to it. It has a high-quality paving material that extends not only through the piazza, but across both New Street and Pearl Street. And what that does, and that was part of our original concept design, but extends the perception of that piazza space all the way across the street to the adjacent buildings, thus engaging those buildings into the project. It also allows, in instance of a larger event, if you were to close down Pearl Street and New Street, it allows the piazza to kind of spill out all the way across the street. Material-wise, you'll see consistent base across the east and west building. That's what's called cast stone or Renaissance stone. It's a masonry product, exactly like limestone. It has some deep reveals cut into it. The next 3 levels up are all masonry with some cast stone trim. And then the top level is a composite panel material, in this case painted a light color. The standalone retail building is also masonry, although a slightly different color. And one of the things that we'd like to emphasize in our design solution is that this is a composition of buildings. It's not a mega block. It's the opposite of a mega block, actually. And we've taken care to make sure that the palette of materials in all 4 buildings, east building, west building, retail, and parking garage, are similar and consistent and compatible, but they're not all exactly the same. So the retail building is going to be a little different in coloration. It has a different kind of detailing. In the masonry, you'll see these square openings versus the arched openings on the east building retail side. The parking garage in the background is a combination of masonry on the corner and a sort of a buff-colored precast concrete with a sandblast finish. There are some, although these are not actual openings into the parking garage, they are recesses that are meant to emulate the scale and size of the residential openings. The parking garage is naturally ventilated, so there will be openings on the end here and on the Pearl Street side. Above the retail, you'll see this landscape trellis. Provides fantastic sort of dappled light on that roof terrace overlooking the piazza, and provides potentially outdoor exercise space for the fitness room that you can see tucked back here in the corner. The bay windows on the east building are shown as a dark color. Again, they're probably this composite panel material, although in the development of the design, we will consider a metal panel as well. That material occurs at these bays. They project slightly, and they turn the corner with this sort of half moon shape. Along the top level of the building, we've cut in several recesses. Those provide private terraces for the upper level residents. Overlooking the piazza, we think of that as a tremendous benefit. Anytime you can get a lot of connectivity between residents in the building and people in the piazza on the ground floor, that's considered positive as far as urban design is considered. We've also done a similar thing at the 3rd and 4th levels now. Little change, we've introduced the idea of some Juliet balconies. These would provide the opportunity for those units to have French doors that open inward, and again, provide a little bit more connectivity between residents and people in the piazza. Okay, we're over at the west building now, corner of New Street and Lake Street looking east. And what we're looking at here are, in the foreground, the west building, a little bit of the east building in the background. Again, we'll see this consistent cast stone base across the lower floor of both buildings. West building is 4 levels, so there's 2 levels with masonry above that, and then a composite panel at the top level. Like the east building, there's a number of private terraces cut into the edge of the building. Up here you can see a little wrought iron rail at the quarter circle where it turns the corner. Some big terraces. These lucky residents get a lot of exposure to the street there. Down at grade, these ground floor terraces, we're showing the consistent low masonry wall across the front here, as well as on New Street all the way down to the corner. I should mention the coloration differences on these 2 buildings too. They're similar buildings. They're like maybe siblings. They're not identical twins, and we don't want them to be. You can see the difference in the coloration of these projecting bays on the west building versus the dark color corners and bays on the east building. There's a slight difference in the masonry color between east and west. So we like, I hate to beat a dead horse, but we like that similarity and the consistency. We just don't want to be the same across the entire length of the block. Okay, back to the piazza and the parking garage. You'll see the retail building in the foreground here. A little bit different masonry detailing. Again, I mentioned the square openings versus the arched openings, but masonry, cast stone, landscape terrace above, all overlooking the piazza. You can see one of the recessed terraces up here in the east building overlooking the piazza, some of those Juliet balconies. The parking garage, as I mentioned, has some openings. It is naturally ventilated, so we are required to have a certain amount of open air. We've introduced a third, bolder color of masonry on the corner of the parking garage, again with windows and window detailing, window heads, lintels that are consistent in size and scale with the rest of the project. Just a few words about sustainability. We consider ourselves not only maybe stewards of the block and stewards of the urban design, but also stewards of the environment. And to that end, I wanted to mention a few of the things that we're going to be doing in terms of green design and sustainability. We will be consistent with the National Association of Home Builders green program, and some of those concerns that we'll be addressing are construction waste recycling, as well as a recycling program for tenants, a very energy efficient building envelope, including efficient HVAC systems and appliance selections, high performing windows, doors, and roofs, an efficient water use, including low flow fixtures, drought resistant and low maintenance landscaping, and indoor air quality measures that will be improved through effective HVAC systems, formaldehyde-free finishes, building products and finishes with minimum of off-gassing VOCs or volatile organic compounds. Considering some product selection like solid surface countertops that are made from recycled materials, as well as carpeting selections that can be made from recycling of plastic bottles. There is another program besides the National Association of Home Builders that will be looking at the Energy Star design, which includes added insulation, sealant, and caulking to minimize air infiltration issues, Energy Star appliance and lighting selections, HVAC duct testing for leakage, and a new test that we've been faced with recently called unit lower door testing that tests the efficiency of the enclosure in each unit. Seeking regional and local materials wherever possible. I mentioned recycling for tenants, recycling of millwork waste within the construction, and I think lastly, but certainly not least, maybe it goes without saying, but these buildings are fully sprinklered and will be complying with all applicable fire codes and building codes. Any questions?
So, Mr. Campbell, just if we can go back briefly to the floor plans for the makeup of the units. Can you speak briefly about the placement of the one-bedroom, two-bedroom, and three-bedroom units, in particular in the west building?
West building, the ones, twos, and threes are generally dispersed. There is a cluster of three-bedroom units that provides the connection to the parking deck here at the end of Woodmont Way. There's a couple reasons for that. It provides some very efficient stacking in terms of a different kind of unit, a three-bedroom unit, which needs to be a narrower dimension from corridor to exterior wall. It also provides a large measure of convenience for residents that have three-bedroom units that might have children. They're close to the parking garage, which provides a huge amenity for a family.
Just one last question. Is there a basement in either the east or the west building?
No basements in either building.
Okay. Board members, your questions for the witness?
I do. Mr. Campbell, how do you access the rooftop of the retail building?
That is through the amenity space, access off the third floor of the east building, so the path of travel is back to the outdoor space.
So you come through the east building,
Correct.
and is there an elevator in the east building between the first and second floor, and then you get out of the elevator on the second floor and walk to the,
Yeah, there are elevators in both buildings that provide access to all floors.
okay.
Okay, other questions, board members? More questions?
Just one other question about the rooftop terrace. Do you anticipate that will be used by the retail use on the first floor, or patrons of those retail uses, or is it mainly for the residents of the building?
At this time, we anticipate it being used by residents of the building only, and it is accessed through what we think of as the fitness club or the amenity space off of the third floor. It is not at this time a public use.
Okay. Other questions, board members? Okay, I'm going to just remind everybody that Mr. Campbell is the architect for this project, and subsequent witnesses are going to be the site engineer, a landscape architect, a parking garage designer, and a traffic engineer, and a planner. So if members of the public have questions regarding the architecture or Mr. Campbell's design, we'd ask you to come up to the microphone, state your name, give us your address, and ask us your question.
And I'm going to add a couple of things. One is, we have a sign-in sheet, so if you're going to come up and ask questions, I'd ask you to sign in, put your name and address. I'm going to ask you to do that for the record anyway, but we will need for you to sign in so we have a record of who had questions or comments. Also want to explain that this is the time for, if you want to ask them, I'm not asking you to ask them, but if you want to ask questions of the architect, it's not the time to dispute what the architect says or to make a statement as to whether you are in favor of the project or not, or whether you like the design or not, but simply questions at this point for the architect.
Okay, seems like we have none, so do you want to close it? Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Dorothy Rasmussen, 180 Center Street, and I'll sign in when I finish. I actually have a question about fire department access, and I don't know if that's an architect's question. And I also wanted to defer to other people if they wanted to come up first. But what kind of access does the fire department have with the trucks if they would have to get in there? That's my question. Well, into anywhere, height-wise, and being able to get in and turn around and do whatever functions that the fire department needs to do. That's my question.
There is access around each surface of the east and west building here, as well as Grove Street at the garage. So I think that's probably adequate for those surfaces. As far as if there's a necessity to get into the courtyard building, we have provided for the ability to get through the back house area into these courtyard areas.
So then there's access in case. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for a great presentation.
We'll just ask you to give us your name and your address, sir.
Sure, Hussein Ali Khan, 15 Ohio Avenue, Metuchen, New Jersey. And my question is about using the National Home Builders Standard of Sustainability as opposed to the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED rating system, and why you chose to use a less demanding and less stringent sustainability standard.
I might question whether one's more demanding than the other. They address slightly different things. But our client, Woodmont, has consistently supported the National Association of Home Builders Green Program, as well as Energy Star Design, and that's the program set out for
Okay, fair enough. So maybe my question is actually for the development representative.
We don't care at all for LEED. We think it's an administrative and driven process that puts more focus on the administration and reporting than it does on the actual results. It's a better program for public buildings and for office buildings. We don't see, even though they've tried to tweak it because the multifamily sector has screamed loudly and clearly, really, across the nation. Certainly, there's some cachet in saying LEED design, particularly in Manhattan. But it's not anything that we've embraced generally because of we'd rather take the $350,000 that it takes to get LEED certification and put it back into the building with additional green elements. And the National Home Builders Association did exactly that by coming up with its own standard by saying, look, LEED isn't really matching multifamily concerns. This product, we're talking about every oven, every refrigerator, those types of things that are addressed much more succinctly in Energy Star and National Home Builders versus LEED.
Yeah, I think that's why I asked.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Hello, Nelson Lee, 16 Bounty Street. I also happen to be the manager of the farmers market, and I'm looking forward to using the piazza space. And so my question is, how do you plan to incorporate feedback from the users of that space, such as the farmers market or the arts council or whoever plans to use the space, in terms of how to incorporate amenities like power, maybe water, washrooms, things like that?
That's not a fair one for Keith either.
Okay.
Although I will say that during the concept design phase, we showed sketches and drawings addressing each of those things and proposed kind of the minimum power and water requirements that would allow flexibility.
Just to that point, there's going to be one witness who just talks about the piazza and the elements and what went into it.
Great.
But the answer to your question is, and we spoke about this with Mr. Constantine, certainly starting with the Farmers Market and maybe the Arts Association and Arts Council, going over where we think panels may be best located and water bids. But the plan is to have both electric and water available in the piazza so that we're not running extension cords all over the place and it's set up for those uses. And again, when Tom testifies for the little hour, you're going to see a lot more of it.
So there'll be a formal meeting or something where you get these requirements
We
from
can
us?
have an informal meeting or a formal meeting,
Okay.
however you want to do it.
And you plan to set one of those up?
Well, we're going to work through Mr. Constantine.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Bill Salmon, 23 Bounty Street. Could you review the mix of bedroom units, how many ones, how many twos, how many threes you have, and the square footage of each?
Can, but I need to get a couple of notes out of that.
While I was looking that up, what is the COA obligation that this project generates?
Why don't you hold off on that? Are we going to address that later on? Trying to decide who's going to, no?
No, so just quickly, the co-obligation in the RFP is 10%. Then through subsequent machinations with co-representatives and so on, it's moved to 15%. Just so there's clarity, every 3-bedroom, and there's only a handful, those are all affordable units because it's a state requirement that a certain percentage of the co-units have to be 3-bedroom. So part of the RFP and part of the agreement with the municipality, because we are not marketing to families, we're not particularly interested in that market. It's not what we do. So any 3-bedroom that's on the plan is an affordable unit. And as Mr. Campbell said, we felt the best place to locate them was closest to the parking garage because the reality is, and we're going to have testimony on school kid generation as well, but where there will be school children generation, I'll be perfectly frank with you, is in a 3-bedroom affordable unit. So to have that closest to the parking garage and not have a mom with a long walk or little ones racing through the hallways, we thought that was the best location.
Okay, short answer, total of 273 units.
I'm sorry, I've lost track of what the question was.
It was the distribution of 1s, 2s, and 3s within the entire project. Total of 273 units, 162 in the west building, 111 in the east building. Of those 273, There are 9 3-bedrooms, 130 2-bedrooms, 100 1-bedrooms, and 34 1-bedrooms plus den.
And square footage roughly?
We have an average in here, someplace that, they do vary, so I'm hesitating a little bit as far as the actual.
That's fine. What's the height of the residential to the parapet? And how high is the parapet itself? You talked about mechanicals on the roof?
Right.
And I just wanted to get an idea what the total height was and how much the parapet height was.
In the west building, 4-bedroom, or the 4-story west building, from average grade to the top of the structure is 47 feet, plus or minus 4-foot parapet on top of that. East building, 5 levels, 58 between average grade and top of structure and another
62. Okay. And the parking garage, how high to the parapet there, do you know?
I'm
By
going to
chance?
defer to the parking garage guys, and I don't know the answer.
And the other thing is, did you consider any brick face for the parking garage? You said it's going to be a concrete material?
Precast concrete, there is some that masonry in the corners, but I would again, maybe you can re-ask that question during the parking garage presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Other members of the public?
I have a question, when there's a chance.
I know, I'm just going to continue with the public, and then we're going to get to your question.
Do you have any floor plans here on the apartments?
Unit layout,
We just, Judge, we just need you to state your name and address. We all know you, but just for the record.
62 Oak Avenue.
Thank you very much, Judge Pleckner.
included in this package, we did some very rough floor plans that indicate sort of a typical 1-bedroom, typical 2-bedroom, typical 3-bedroom unit, and maybe suggest talk to Woodmont about access to those plans.
Well, the reason I ask, I have seen apartment developments where a 2-bedroom is really a 3-bedroom because they have a dining room with a door. And I would like to see what is actually planned here.
We designed the building from the inside out, obviously, because every bedroom has to have a window. Dining room can't be a bedroom if it doesn't have a window, it doesn't have a closet. We're not interested in creating market-rate 3 bedrooms. That's not the business we do. We don't have child amenities. We don't have a playground. It's not a place, frankly. It's a great place if you have a baby and a stroller and you want to be in town. But it's not a place to raise a family of 4. So most of our floor plans are open, so there isn't necessarily a dining room. The kitchen flows in. As I'm sure you're aware, all new construction is all about flowing open spaces and not little rooms like they built back in the 50s and 60s. So I don't know how to give you any more assurance other than the fact that we'll have to pull a CO for each unit, and presumably we'll be held to task on the number of bedrooms that we represent.
Okay. And now I'm going to let the member of the board ask a question, because she's been waiting patiently.
Oh, sure. I'm not sure to whom I should address it, either Mr. Santola or Mr. Campbell, but my question has to do with the apartments on New Street and the commercial versus residential component of that middle section. For as long as I can remember, we've always been told by Jim and others, as we discussed the master plan, thinking about this portion of town as a barbell and commercial on one side and the Renaissance on the other, what's now, I guess, Borough Hardware, that section, and trying to build New Street up so that we could connect those two entities and keep, or extend Main Street, so to speak. So I'm just, considering how many apartments, and it looks beautiful, but how many there are along that bar piece. Yes, those 3 in particular, and the others on the opposite side. Why you decided to put more residential there and less commercial, or have you considered maybe extending some of the commercial over a little bit to provide more?
We did have a number of discussions about it. I think the short answer is that nobody was secure in providing too much retail space. Even the 12,000 square foot that we've got facing the piazza, which we think is certainly required to activate this this piazza is maybe a little bit of a stretch, being a block off of Main Street. It's tough to lease space off of Main Street, and I don't think anybody was convinced that there was a market for retail space along U Street this far away from the center. That's how we got to this solution, but I think it's not an uncommon solution with these sorts of mixed-use sites to combine retail storefronts as well as residential living units with these exterior patios that kind of bridge the gap between public and private.
I think the hope is that both those areas will grow, and I guess, you know, if in the short term that could be used as residential but maybe converted in a more, at a different economic time, would that be a consideration? I'd like to see personally a little more commercial walkability right on that main drag, but.
It's certainly more possible in the East Building here, where we do have maybe a little extra height available to us in terms of floor to floor at the first floor, but I mean, anything's possible, and it'd be great to see, from an urban design point of view, great to see a lot of activity energizing the street between up here at Main Street and potential new developments in this direction, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. But at this point, I don't think it would be wise to count on too much retail marketing.
Okay. I have a second question also, I'm sorry. So the plans look beautiful and the architecture is gorgeous. We've all seen areas that come out, you know, are built and they look beautiful, and over time they sort of, you know, the impeccability erodes. What assurances will there be that, you know, things will continue to look nice and vibrant and gorgeous the way they look, and the gorgeous basin balconies and so on will be visibly appealing from the street, and if you're in the piazza, that you're looking at something that's continues to be maintained and kept up? I know these are high-end apartments, but what sorts of assurances?
Well, the best assurances are selection of materials and detailing materials, and that's on us. And we fully expect to provide high-quality masonry, cast stone, paving materials that will stand the test of time. As far as 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that's more an operations question for our client, I think. But yes, the initial material selected will certainly be more than able to withstand the normal weathering that this climate gets.
And further that, we have yet to sell anything that we built that encourages you to go into Morristown and walk around. Those projects will be open for 6 or 7 years. But the real blunt answer to your question is, what you're looking at is incredibly expensive to design and build. And if we don't achieve the rents that we hope to, that we expect to in the market, not just in the first year or the first 2 or the first 3, but in the first 12 or the first 15, this is a losing endeavor for us. So I hate to give a money answer at any time in front of the planning board, but the reality is it's vital for us to maintain this as a Class A luxury transit village for the next, however, 30 years in order to justify the level of detail, materials, and expense that we're investing in the location.
Okay. No, not at all. Other questions for the witness? Another member of the public.
Oh, sorry.
No, come right
Steve Ruler, 16 Durham. I have a few questions. Number one is there a public bathroom for the plaza?
Good question.
That's a good question. Yeah.
At this point, there is not a public bathroom access from the piazza itself. If there was a restaurant, yes, obviously they would be required to have bathrooms, but there's not it's not like a shopping mall where there's a public bathroom.
Okay, so if we have a concert or something, we'll just plunk down a few nice porta potties, I suppose. I think we really need a public bathroom. Someone said, oh, it could be a problem, we'll bring riffraff in. A problem's not a problem until it's a problem. It could be locked up at a certain time. There's got to be a public bathroom. Number two, the pool. The town has a pool. I think there could be better use.
Excuse me, Mr. Ritter, if you're going to make comments, you
Okay.
have to save those to the end. This is the time just for
Okay.
questions of the
Okay.
witness.
How big is the pool?
It's probably a 20 by 40 is a standard size for residential pool, but recognize it's a private use, it's not a public pool.
I guess two more things, and one is I was hoping it'd be more of a building where the public could walk through. And the second is, I agree with Ms. Bush, I'd like to see more retail on New Street. Thanks.
Okay. It's all good. Okay, another member of the public?
Joseph Mitchell, 239 Amboy Avenue. Just a couple of questions. The height on the west building is 47 feet plus 4 feet?
Plus or minus, yeah. Top of structure from average grade, 47.
All right, so that's 47, 51 feet.
You wanted to do something like that?
Okay, and the east building is 51 plus 4?
No, 58 plus 4.
58 plus 4. Okay,
Another
so
level.
62.
Yeah.
62, okay. The other question is, how many elevators are in each building?
Got 2 and 2 in each building, and one of those would be a swing gap for move-ins.
Okay. So 2 elevators, front and back, I guess?
Third group at the lobby here.
Right. Okay, so there's 1 on each side. Where's the...
Two elevators in the west building,
Oh, okay,
two elevators in each.
But 1 set of 2?
Yes.
All right, so everybody has to walk either around or to that twin set?
Correct. Yeah. Everybody has access from the parking deck directly into the building corridor here, or here.
All right, but it's still just the 2 twin sets?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you get back to Chicago before it snows.
Reed, did you have a question?
Yes. I really wasn't clear, echoing Ms. Bush's comments and Mr. Reuter's comments, as to why retail would not be able to go down on New Street there, and why the residential is being proposed in this application. Could that?
Physically, it could, absolutely. There's no physical reason we couldn't do that, and as far as I know, no zoning reason either, but it's just a matter of market demand. That I think that the developer feels that at this point in the development of the block, both in and around the block, that's about the right amount of retail.
Because market demand could increase in the future. All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions for this witness?
Daniel LaBar, 581 Middlesex Avenue, box 4495, Metuchen. Was there any consideration for incorporating as a design element the existing, or not existing, but through a design, the American Legion post as a possibility of follow-on design element, sort of as a landmark aspect?
I'm going to let the developer answer that.
The answer to that question was yes. That was discussed. It was ultimately decided that it wasn't really compatible with multifamily residential use. There was a question of where it would go vis-a-vis the parking, and frankly, whether or not they could have the private setting that they look for in order to host anniversary parties and christenings and so on. So the answer is yes. We did look at that, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't compatible.
Is this the AMP building?
Okay. Other members of the public? Oh, we'll wait for the sign-in sheet, no problem. You don't have to struggle to spell everyone's name this time.
No.
In charge, 51 York Avenue. I'm also the executive director of the Metuchen Area Chamber of Commerce. And my question is regarding the retail space. You've talked about square footage, but I wondered if you have any expectation for what the breakup of that will be. What kind of offices or businesses you expect to have in that space. And also, not to keep harping on the extension of the retail space, but I wondered if you had considered, at least as of late, the fact that we are expecting to have a Whole Foods market at the end of the street within the next few years.
The answer is yes. We originally we had talked about that one building on the right-hand side as being some sort of green grocer, fresh grocer. That's probably off the table if everything goes
Right.
as planned. The answer to your question is we are going to build this space as flexible as possible. The reality is that downtown retail is struggling. It struggles everywhere. We have vacant space in Morristown, which is a pretty good retail town, since 2007. So while that market may come back, I'm not so sure. And I think there's a place for the type of retail we're expecting. Nice restaurant, coffee shop, maybe a gift shop. But we will keep that very flexible, and frankly, initially, we'll take all comers to try and get that right mix. But our initial plan is to have a fairly sizable upscale restaurant, bar, grill with outdoor dining, and then we'll use that as a magnet to try and draw similar uses if maybe.
So the restaurant-type establishment would be adjacent to the parking deck? Is that correct? Or is that, you're flexible?
I'm trying to figure that
You
out.
don't- okay,
These folks come
okay.
in and they have a vision, and we work with them.
Okay,
I
so
think we
then-
could go either place.
So is it safe to say like maybe 2 or 3 businesses in that area?
12, I would say probably 4 or 5, hopefully.
Okay, and so again, you don't think the fact that the Whole Foods Market will most likely be down the block will affect our ability to attract businesses to the area? Or you're not?
I think it'll change who we attract, but no, I don't think it'll.
Okay.
It hurts the ability to do that fresh grocer we talked about, but I think we'll find other compatible uses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else from the public?
I haven't been kicked out yet. Hi, Sean Massey, 93 Highland Ave, also Parking Authority Commissioner. Could you explain for the benefit of the public here what the concept of flexible space is and how it might possibly work in a project like this, particularly on that frontage along New, which has been raised by the board? Right. Yeah, if you did flex that space, conceding that the retail market is what it is, very weak, likely weak in the short term, 5 years, 10 years, but as Mr. Santola spoke to, it's a 30-plus year project. If we did want to flex that space, what would the measures that we would take in the design to see to it that we could do just that?
Typically, and I think maybe what you're talking about under another name is live-work units.
Sure.
Which we've done, and we like. They're very specific kinds of things, and they typically do require greater depth from exterior wall to corridor than what we're showing here. This is a typical residential depth, and obviously works well for the 1s and 2s that we're showing here. If it were true live-work, you need a deeper space, so there could be, it works better for both live and work. So there'd probably be a little change in the dimensioning of this configuration to make that work.
And there could be the possibility, again, if it were straight residential to start, which we're obviously proposing here, to just do a straight-up flip, where it's residential to start, say certain market conditions are met in 10 years' time, whatever it is, when there is increased demand for retail space, that it could convert from residential to retail, where it's small footprint. Those are, I see 1-bedrooms there, that's a string of 1-bedrooms. So you're looking at pocket retail spaces of 1,000, 1,200 square feet, whatever it might be.
We could even knock a wall down.
Right.
If the market goes in that direction, we would certainly.
So that's something you'd be open to. Okay, that's wonderful.
I think everybody would love to see market demand increase the amount of retail. So, as I said before, I think it's physically possible.
Great. Without offering testimony, I would just say I think that's something that folks here are sensitive to, given the project going on down the street, and we have only got so much downtown to work with. It's not like we're annexing Edison, as far as I know. Second question, on the LEED item, I appreciate what you said with respect to the administrative challenges associated with LEED. One of the things that a lot of developers are doing, because of the popularity of the LEED program, is they're just scoring it on the LEED scale, presenting that to the public and to the planning board or municipality so that folks can see where it measures up, and then not necessarily going for the certification. Is that something that the applicant would be open to, that you would be able to do?
The reality is we've already looked at the LEED scorecard.
Great.
And yeah, we could make that available.
That'd be great. Okay, wonderful.
One of the nice things about the site, the great things about this site, actually,
is from a lead scoring standpoint, it gets a lot of sustainable site points. I mean, it's a natural in that it's close to transit, it's close to parking, its walk score is probably pretty good. There's all sorts of things that contribute to a high sustainable site score on the lead checklist. So probably would do pretty well without even trying.
Absolutely, yeah. No, thank you for a very thoughtful presentation. Thanks.
Okay. Other members of the public?
Do I have to come to the mic?
That's up to the attorney.
Yeah, because.
Yes, he's giving me the nod of acknowledgement.
All right, Hussein Ali Khan, once again, 15 Ohio Avenue. I've been interested in this discussion about extending the retail down New Street. What if it goes the other way, and we end up having dark retail there for a long time? Would you, or is it possible for the applicant to convert the retail on New Street to residential?
No. I mean, not legally without coming back to the board. This is a site plan approval, so they've applied for X number of residential units and a certain square footage of retail, so that's what they're getting. And to go either way, you would have to come back and get an additional approval.
So is the applicant in some way being subsidized or incentivized to put that much retail there? Because I'm a member of the Development Commission, and we do have dark stores on Main Street, right? It's one of the best main streets in New Jersey, and we've got dark retail there. So what I'd like to know is that, do we have some kind of flexibility to help us mitigate a dark retail circumstance?
The answer is yes. Of course, Mr. Renard's right, we have to come back to the board. There's creative uses that are going on. One of the reasons we were concerned about how much retail we could support here, I think we're at the right number. But if, in fact, after years of marketing and lowering rents, we can't get it done, then we'll have to think about some other types of uses. I would suggest to you that the building right along the parking garage, the separate retail building, doesn't lend itself to a conversion, other than to maybe some type of public space, a fitness center or something. But the piece along the piazza does. And we could convert that. And in fact, we looked at that at our Transit Village in Morristown, which is only 8,000 square feet of ill-conceived retail. This is much more properly conceived, but we ended up filling it up.
I guess you answered the second part of my question. Is there any sort of incentive to help you?
We are open to all incentives that anybody would like to provide, but at the moment, the answer is no. There are no incentives. I fought with Len for about 8 months. I couldn't get him anywhere.
Okay, anyone else from the public who hasn't spoken yet might want an opportunity? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion for this applicant, though we ask him to hang around in case there are questions later. And Jennifer, if you'd like to proceed with your next witness.
Yes, next witness, Anthony Castillo, please.
While he's setting up to the board, you'll see that I put the book together wrong. You probably already figured that out. That was completely my fault. The first 3 pages actually deal with Anthony, but you probably already figured that out. So we're going back to the beginning of the book, and the first 3 exhibits are good.
Where is he on here? Tony.
It says it was in
Sorry,
order,
sorry.
just like it is.
Anthony, those exhibits are in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's make sure the public can see those exhibits. Let's turn them sideways so the board and the public can both see them.
Get it a look, does that easel go up to me? Higher if you can. you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
That witness has been sworn.
Thank you. And
Would you state your full name for the record loud enough for everybody to hear it, please?
Good evening. My name is Anthony Castillo.
And,
Last name is Castillo. His address is 12A Maple Avenue, Pine Brook, New Jersey.
and there you go. Go right
Can you
ahead.
give the board your professional qualifications, please?
Sure. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Jersey, New York, and Maryland. And I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering as well as a master's of environmental engineering, both from NJIT.
And by whom are you employed?
I'm a partner with SESI Consulting Engineers, and we prepare the site plan that we're testifying in front of you this evening.
Very good. We'll accept Mr. Castillo as an expert witness.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Castillo, I will turn it over to you. Do you want to introduce the project for members of the public and the board?
Sure, thank you very much. Although I'd like to say it is hard to top that great presentation before me, so.
And I'm going to encourage you to speak directly into that microphone.
Sure thing. To recap from the previous testimony by both Woodmont Metuchen and the project architect, the project proposes a mixed-use residential community. In Metuchen, that consists of the following elements. As I mentioned before, a 4-story west building that consists of residential apartments, a 5-story east building that consists of ground floor retail and as well as residential apartments on the upper floors, a single-story a retail building, parking garage, as well as a community piazza along the northeast corner of the property. The first exhibit that I have here is an aerial. It's an aerial exhibit, just to kind of orient you where the property is. It's centrally located in the borough of Metuchen, along its eastern side. It has frontage on Pearl Street. To the north, along New Street. To the south, the railroad, and along the western side is the Lake Avenue right-of-way.
Hang on a second, Mr. Castillo. What I'm asking you to do is, I'll let council mark it later, but we're going to mark that exhibit as A2, just for the record. And you're also referring, the sheet that you're referring to is in the board's package, but for the public, it's A2 for the purpose of this hearing.
Okay.
Yep.
So, at present, the property, as had been mentioned to a certain extent before, the property does consist of primarily an asphalt paved surface parking lot. The American Legion building is located along the property's western edge. The Parking Authority building is located on the Pearl Street, the eastern edge of the property. Right now, this property is accessed. I think what I'd like to do is to switch gears, and I'm going to go from a macro view, kind of start to bring it down towards a smaller site perspective.
Have to flip your page.
Now, is that in our package, council?
Yes.
Okay.
This is page 3,
Okay.
I believe. Page 5. It's the back of page 2.
That one?
Yes.
All right.
And so we'll mark this A3 as well.
We'll mark that one A3.
So right now, the property is accessed via two driveway entrances right now. The first being directly opposite Center Street. The second location is also located on the southeastern corner of the property near Pearl Street. The adjacent properties consist of the train station to the south. There's a ShopRite liquor building, parking lot area, as well as a precision repair building just immediately to the north beyond New Street. Over to the east, there's a Wells Fargo building, as well as an existing restaurant and additional 1 to 2 story buildings. And across Lake Street, there is an existing vacant retail building. Now, we are, as mentioned before by the attorney, we are here before the board this evening seeking two things: preliminary final major site plan approval, and we're also seeking approval of a subdivision plan for the property. Now I'm going to play switching boards again. Switch it to one more board.
we'll mark this A4,
Please.
which is the subdivision plan.
Switch again.
Tony, if you can describe briefly what we're proposing to do as it.
Absolutely. This exhibit was actually prepared by the project surveyor as a preliminary final major subdivision plan. The project architect in his earlier testimony had discussed the proposed buildings to you. What we wanted to do is to relate them to the subdivision. The property is being consolidated, the proposal is to consolidate this property into 3 lots. The first is Lot 36.01, Block 115. And this particular block will include the 2 proposed buildings as well as a freestanding retail along Pearl Street. Lot 3602, Block 115, will include the proposed parking garage. And the remainder, Lot 36.03, Block 115, will include the proposed piazza area. And I do like to note that all of these 3 proposed lots will be conforming upon conclusion of the proposed subdivision. Sure.
We're going to keep nagging you, hold that microphone closer up towards your face, and they'll be able to hear you better. A little bit higher up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So now I'm going to switch again.
So we're going back to A3, which is the rendered site plan.
That's correct. So, in terms of the preliminary and final major site plan approval we seek this evening, just to clarify, this project is a planned unit commercial development, otherwise known as a PUCD, which is a conditional use in the D1 Downtown Development District. The Borough Ordinance, in one of its sections, 11091 FB, puts forth 4 specific conditions that the project is required to meet. The first is that the minimum tract area has to be 4 acres, including any new street. The property is, as a whole, is a 5-acre tract. Also, the tract has to have frontage on New Street and Pearl Street, which it does. Third, the tract has to be within 200 yards of the Metuchen train station building on the northbound side, and the tract is within that distance. Then the 4th item is that a common open space in the form of a town green shall be provided in the approximate location as shown on what's called a regulating plan. The project does propose a public piazza in that area as required. There's also some housekeeping in terms of zoning bulk requirements that we need to address. The property is subject to a number of different bulk requirements because of the fact that it's in the PUCD overlay and also within the D1 zone. First has to do with the lot area. Again, as I mentioned before, 4 acres are required. The property consists of 5 acres, so it doesn't meet that requirement. It has a 40-foot minimum lot width requirement, and a very substantial 596-foot dimension is proposed. We have a 100-foot required lot depth because of the D1 zone. 287 feet is proposed. The rear yard, 10 foot is required. 12 feet is proposed. There are curb setback requirements. The Pearl Street building, no taller than 2 stories. 10-foot minimum required, we propose that number, 10 feet. There's a building 4 stories or more for all streets. 20 feet are required, we propose that number. And also in all, there's one other case here, it is not applicable, that's considered, it's for all other cases which does not apply in this particular project. There's a maximum building coverage that's required as a percentage of the lot area, 70% maximum, we propose 40%, so we meet that requirement. There's a maximum impervious coverage, also as a percentage of the lot area, 90% is the maximum allowed in the D1 zone. 85% is proposed. There's a minimum public open space requirement, which is a ½ acre, and we do meet that with the proposed public piazza area. There's a maximum height. Now I'm going to switch back a little bit, and I need to bring back again the first exhibit to clarify something. In this first exhibit, the reason I have to mention this is the actual overall parcel for purposes of determining maximum heights. There are 3 subparcels, I call them parcel A, B, and C as part of the regulating plan. And the parcel A area is essentially the corner, the corner that's comprised of Lake Avenue and New Street. Intersection, there's a sliver of property there. Parcel B is a section that's that's located over on the western side of the property. Essentially, it bisects the property. Parcel C is the remainder on the eastern side, and there's some differences there. So, in other words, for all those three parcels, we do meet the maximum height requirements for those parcels.
Want to briefly go through the site layout?
Sure. Let's switch back again. Now, in terms of site layout, both the west and east buildings will have main access to them from the proposed Woodmont Way, which essentially bisects the property and provides access to the fronts of both of the west and the east buildings. The retail component of the east building will have access from the east side, from the piazza side. The proposed freestanding retail building will have access from Pearl Street. There'll be vehicular access to the proposed parking structure, which is located on the southeast corner of the property here, from both Woodmont Way as well as Pearl Street. Parking for this development will be shared with commuters via this parking garage. I'd like to mention that there will be a 10-foot wide concrete walk and landscaped area along the Lake Avenue and New Street frontage. This concrete walk will be in accordance with borough standards. I'd like to mention that in terms of garbage and recycling operations, I wanted to point out that these will be collected via a private service. There will be back-of-house service in both proposed residential buildings. One other note that in terms of during construction, the site will have construction fencing with signage and scrim on it. And we understand that this particular item will need a design waiver for it. And at this point, I'd like to request a design waiver be granted for that element.
Which element?
It's for construction fencing.
Where's that
It would have signage and scrim on it.
5 feet in height.
That's square.
Now, in terms of, with regard to utilities, storm and sanitary, sewerage, water service, gas and electric, are all fortunately, are all located adjacent to the site. Is our understanding, based on recent discussions with the borough engineer, that there is adequate capacity in terms of both water supply and sanitary sewer systems to serve the project. In terms of fire protection standards, the project will meet all applicable codes and standards. That'll change focus a little bit in terms of stormwater management and drainage. The property, back up a second here. The topography of the property generally slopes in an east to west direction, primarily towards the Lake Street, New Street intersection, which is in this direction here. What happens when it rains, you get runoff that flows off the paved surfaces, and it goes through via breaks in the curb along the edges of the parking lot, and ultimately goes into inlets that goes into a sewer trunk system, a sewer trunk line that goes under New Street, flows towards the west. Since the property is considered to be a major development because it disturbs more than 1 acre, proposes to disturb more than 1 acre of area, it has to meet certain requirements. It has to meet what's called the quantity reductions. In other words, you have to look at how much amount, what the amount of volumes, what the peak flow rates of runoff are for certain storm events to make sure that it's not creating a negative impact to the receiving piping. So what we did was we looked at this analysis, and we determined that, in point of fact, the development, based on a comparison of what the existing and the proposed impervious surfaces are, and impervious surfaces meaning buildings and pavement, in fact, it's going to reduce that impervious coverage by 0.77 acre. What does that mean? That means it's approximately 15% of the overall site area. And what that does is that allowed us to look at this project in terms of how do we quantify the overall volume reductions for certain target events, for example, the 2-year storm, a 10-year storm, and a 100-year storm. And these are storms that are part of the land development ordinance in town, as well as state requirements as well. What we determined is that the development, in point of fact, would reduce these runoff volumes by about 25% for the 2-year, the 10-year, and the 100-year. One of the other things we looked at, and we were concerned about the piping system and how that would impact where it was connecting to on New Street.
Why don't you stop back with the reduction of runoff volumes and just talk about how you're going to achieve that?
Sure. When you look at at reductions of volume, by reducing the amount of impervious surfaces, that makes that analysis very, very straightforward. Because otherwise, if you're proposing the opposite, which would mean to increase impervious surfaces, you're then now forced to kind of look at the project at a different perspective and look at things in terms of flow rates. And it's very, very hard to meet that standard without having to propose some sort of an underground detention system of sorts. Because now you're really, what's happening is you're not being able to, even though you may be reducing peak flow rates, volumes still are larger. So in a case like this, where it's a full straightforward reduction of impervious surfaces, the items that create flooding, that allows us to look at this and be able to directly show what those positive impacts are to the receiving water downstream.
That sufficiently answer your question, Gadsden?
Sure. The expert is satisfied with it.
Bottom line is what we did was we looked at this system and we determined that when you have these substantial storm events, even connecting into New Street, assuming worst case scenarios where the piping underneath New Street had a surge in it, we weren't going to create a negative impact to the inlets. In other words, create a situation where you're creating geysers. Right? That's something that is always very important. We want to make sure that we're not creating adding to the to situations downstream. Flooding is an issue. It's a very important issue. We want to make sure that we're not exacerbating any negative impacts. So in other words, to conclude with that, we are creating a positive impact by not generating additional volumes and thereby worsening any flooding conditions.
And Mr. Castillo, to your knowledge, did the planning board engineer also review the plans relative to the stormwater management system?
Yes, yes.
Did they conclude that, in fact, the proposal, or our development proposal as proposed would in fact meet the stormwater management requirements of the borough?
Yes, the borough engineer did agree with that, with our statements. To switch gears, I wanted to discuss just very briefly lighting. The project will utilize essentially a Main Street style street lamp in accordance with borough standards. And just to state that final placement of these lamps will be coordinated with the borough planner. And also in terms of landscaping, the landscape plan as shown on our plans at this point is illustrative, and we will coordinate once again with the borough planner to finalize placement of these street plantings for the project. And in terms of the piazza itself, Tom Carmen, landscape architect from Little Barrow, will provide some descriptive testimony regarding it.
Did you have an opportunity to review an engineering review letter from the borough, from the planning board's engineer?
I did.
And do you have any comments that put on the record relative to the engineering review letter?
In general, we took no exception to the letter. There were some minor items that we did take some exception on, only a few of them. And in terms of these they had to do with site, it's under the section of site considerations. The concerns had to do with essentially the request for contributions for fair share in terms of for the stormwater impacts. Based on what I just mentioned before, it's our opinion that in reality what's happening here is the project is not going to create a negative impact. Therefore, our collective opinion is that we don't feel that we should have to provide at this point a fair share of a project we're not creating a negative impact to.
Council, if you don't mind, I think for the boards, so the board can keep track of what's agreed to and what's not. I realize there's a number of items, but it might be worthwhile to just go through them one at a time. I mean, some of them are simply comments, obviously, but some of them are agreements with the testimony, and some of them are disagreements, apparently. So I think it might be productive to just go
Well,
through
it's
them.
typically the board's practice to go through the memos item by item sequentially, and given the nature and the volume of testimony we're going to hear tonight, it might be perhaps recommended that we can go through the ones that pertain to the witnesses, so that,
yes,
maybe at the end, sum total, we'll have all the questions answered, but only the ones that are relevant to the witnesses. So all that's just to say is whatever questions relate to him, have him answer them.
Well, I just wanted to get back to Mr. Renau's point. If we go through that letter one item at a time, we're going to have 4 meetings. We were careful to meet and go over all of those items. There were conversations back and forth, obviously, between the engineer, and there are only a few that there's still a dispute. So I would beg the board to just let...
Oh, no. If you can say by some that you agree with numbers X to X and we're done, that's fine. It's only the ones that you don't agree with that we'll need to review item by item.
Great. So I'm telling you, we agree with everything except for the handful that he's about to say.
So why don't we identify those handful by number for the attorney, and we'll know exactly what those are.
Okay. So we're looking at the Mazer Consulting letter dated July 11, 2004. I'd ask you to go to page 4, site consideration, where we take exception to items number 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, as Mr. Castillo pointed out, had to do with off-track improvements, in particular with regard to stormwater management. And I believe that is also
That also relates to number 2 as well.
And 3, I think just the real question is how far of the milling is going to go, and you can usually explain that.
Sure.
Well, let's stick with 1 and 2 for now.
Yes.
Why don't we talk about why it is that the applicant feels that either off-track improvements are not required, or that the developer should not be required to contribute to them? I assume that's what the position is, right?
That is.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us why.
Well, the fact that, based on an analysis that we've undertaken with the connections that we're proposing to the stormwater trunk system, the municipal trunk system, by way of reducing the volumes, reducing the contributions of flow from our property into that system, we feel that we should not have to submit a fair share contribution, because in fact we're lessening we're lessening the contributory flows to that system. We're not exacerbating. In other words, we're not adding to that. So for that reason, we feel that that we should not have to make a contribution.
Okay, so it's your professional opinion that no improvement to the system is required. We're talking about stormwater. No improvement is required to the stormwater drainage system as a result of your development. In fact, you are reducing the amount of stormwater, and therefore there is no need for an improvement, and therefore there's nothing to contribute to. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. What's the next item that you don't want to contribute to?
The next is, I would say, clarification and perhaps a comment is number 3 regarding the width of pavement of both New Street and Pearl Street being milled and overlaid. And so, Tony, if you could describe what we're proposing as it relates to the milling and overlay.
Right now, the proposal that we have is to perform mill and overlay in the areas along Pearl Street and New Street that are immediate, that will be given additional surface treatments adjacent to the piazza areas. We feel that at this point, the balance of Pearl Street and New Street, the condition of that pavement does not merit having to undergo a full mill and overlay system of it at this point, based on its current condition.
So you're proposing with respect to New, and what about Pearl?
All of them.
All right, so all of Pearl, you're proposing to either mill and pave or mill and pave or install improvements in the roadway, is that right?
Yeah, Pearl from the end to New.
Right. And New, is it your proposal that the areas, basically the areas that are still shown in gray that are not outlined in some fashion, that you feel that those are adequate and they're going to remain that way as a result of construction and so forth, and that as a result the applicant shouldn't be required to pay for milling and paving of those areas, is that right?
That's our position.
Same position on Lake Avenue?
Same with Lake Avenue.
Well, Lakes Estate.
Lakes Estate, right.
You know, Mr. Renat, you're making a really good point, so how about if we try and reach a quick compromise here? We were on New today, we think it's actually in pretty good shape. But you're right, given the construction, there may be some type of reduction in the quality of the road. So we would agree that if there's, you can choose the word, Mr. Renat, material adverse impact because of all of our construction, that we will in fact mill, pave, and reconstruct the areas that require along the front of the project down to Lake. And we'll do that in coordination with the fair nature of the municipal engineering plan.
Why don't we hear from our engineer?
That would be a fair assumption that, we're assuming, or we know that there's going to be a lot of heavy equipment coming in, especially on New Street, some cranes and heavy equipment loads, and, we could inspect that as a condition that if it needs to be, there may be even some base repair that might be necessary for this area, in addition to some of the curbing too along the applicant's side of the road. Because on the plans, they showed some curb to be replaced, maybe not replaced, which I question whether or not the stability of that after construction. In addition to Pearl Street, that's where the parking garage is going to be, and, we'd really like to get a nice new pavement in that area, in addition to all the utilities that will be tied into along there. So that's the reasoning from curb to curb as to why we asked for mill and overlay.
So then your offer is to pave Pearl Street along with the surface treatment that we talked about, paving Pearl Street all the way from the end by the deck to New.
Correct.
And then work with our engineer to do New to Lake.
Well, we're definitely going to do all the outside areas of the piazza.
Okay,
We only
right.
do from the piazza edge to lake.
Okay.
Depending on how it works when we're done.
Okay.
Well, the applicant has characterized you as fairly, so I think that that's a good description. So it seems we're all in agreement, and this is an important point. I know it was for the board, so given that there's malleability, that's a good thing, so we thank you for that.
All right, so we're talking about all of Pearl and then such of new as the engineer and the planner will require, depending upon the condition. Is that right?
Definitely a lawyer.
They're only reasonable, there is no other requirement.
That's assumed.
Now, the second portion of number one, which dealt with decorative materials, I don't assume you're taking exception to that, right?
No, in fact, we'll have the testimony as to what we're doing there next.
Okay, very good.
The next item in the board's engineering letter is site consideration number 12, page 5, has to do with proposed improvement at the intersection. And I think we need more of a clarification here than us taking exception with it. It has to do with our access to be able to.
Right, I think all we needed to say, Mr. Arnab, was that the right-of-way was available, particularly as we move towards the lake. So as long as the right-of-way is available, we'll do that. We have run into the situation in other municipalities, particularly ones that, with older downtowns, that those right-of-ways aren't there, and it becomes a real challenge to get that done.
Understood.
Okay, so as long as there are right-of-ways, the work will be done?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that covers 12. What else?
Traffic considerations number 5. You remember that the original plan showed what we'll call a kiss and ride turnaround at the end of Pearl. Nexus knows far more about parking than I do. Has real concerns that will back up and cause all kinds of delays as they enter, to cars trying to enter the garage or exit the garage. So they're going to testify that when they come up, if they have a proposal where we'll be moving people along, there'll be an area where you can take turn, but it won't be an inviting area with a circle, because what happens is nobody just gets dropped off. They wait for the train to come in. If it's raining, they wait till they see the train coming down the track, and the next thing you know, we're all back up Pearl Street. People can't get in the garage. So that's not a no, but they'll explain how they'll handle that.
So you're going to seek relief for 5, but provide testimony afterwards with that witness?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Stormwater management, comment number 1, I believe.
I think we
Mr.
resolved that issue.
Yeah,
Castillo
one
resolved
was
that
done.
with the planning board's engineer.
That's right.
And utilities comments, 1, 2, and 3. This is page 10 of 13. I believe we've already provided testimony with regard to the sanitary sewage demand and sewer capacity calculations.
Yes. And what I'd like to add at this point is that we did have a...
Excuse me, could you say those numbers one more time? I'm sorry.
1, 2, and 3 of the utility section is page 10.
Page 10, that's the important information you were
Thank
looking
you.
for.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Franza, the borough engineer, and I did have that discussion regarding those 3 items in the utility section, where we agreed that we would also provide a follow-up letter to her attention, clarifying exactly, for the record, what those demand values were, for the record, and also for, as part of subsequent applications that we need to make to other agencies down the line.
So it sounds like more that you're in agreement and not necessarily
Yes.
seeking relief on those?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
That's right.
I just wanted to make that clear for the...
No, it's okay. I'm going to, whatever rules you want to go by, I'm just going to skip them if you say you agree.
We have no other comments related to the Mazer July 11th letter.
And by comments, you mean you have no other objections?
No
You
other
agree with everything else?
exceptions or comments related to that.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then I have nothing further from Mr. Castillo.
Great, then I'm going to ask the board members to ask their questions first of Mr. Castillo. So board members, if you have questions for Mr. Castillo, now's the time.
I just have some questions relative to the Mazer report. Could you just indicate it's under general comments, 5, 7, and 8 on page 3. So you're going from, right now, the entire block and lots are owned by the parking authority, is that correct? The current property is owned by the parking authority?
Yeah, you know what, this may be a little better for me. The parking authority currently owns all of the lots. The 3 lots will be divided. Woodmont Metuchen will own the big lot, which will contain the retail and the residential units.
Okay.
The parking authority will own the parking deck lot, whereon it has a lease agreement with Nexus to build the deck and manage the deck. And then the third parcel is the piazza, and there's still conversations, we're amenable. Public spaces like that can be handled a lot of different ways. The town may want to take direct title, or they may want to leave the title with the parking authority or with Woodmont and simply put a public easement over that square. So that little piece, I think, ultimately is a town council and a mayor decision, along with the town attorney. And obviously, we'll work with them to get there. There will be no homeowners association. It's not a condominium. Woodmont Metuchen will own all of the residential units.
Okay, okay. And will Woodmont Way be a private road then?
Woodmont Way will be a private road. We'll have 100% responsibility for maintenance, repair, and snow removal.
And I guess item 8 is phasing. Do you have is there any testimony in what you anticipate?
Sure. I'll give you that briefly. I think that's an excellent question. As many of you know, we are relocating the American Legion, and we had a number of meetings with their membership and their leadership, and our good friend, the post commander, is here tonight. So we have to build. Our agreement with them is that we have to build the new hall before we can take down the old hall, so that they'll never be out of business. They provide a lot of necessary services for veterans all over the county, so that's important to all of us. So we'll be doing that while Nexus begins the garage construction, and for some short period of time, the one side of the parking deck will remain open while Nexus puts their footings in and begins the garage. They'll then, and there's a plan in place to relocate all the parkers, which actually I know was a subject of conversation last night, an agreement last night with the parking authority and the folks from Nexus, and they can put a finer point on that if you'd like later. At which time, we'll come in and start to dig some footings. We'll leave the piazza side completely to Nexus so they can stack all the concrete members that they need while they're building their deck. We can start to do some work over on the Lake Street side to get our footings in and so on. And then once we move the American Legion out, which we expect to be about 6 months into the process, it's going to take us to build their new building, then we can take that old building down and really get at it in earnest. At that point, we expect the parking garage to be basically done other than interior electric and so on, and so then we can move over to the piazza side and begin to put the footings in for the building on that half of the site. That's the expected phasing plan. Like every battle plan, it never survives meeting the enemy, but we'll try and stay as close to that as we can.
Okay. So the linchpin is basically moving the Veterans Hall.
Well, no, the linchpin is the parking garage has to go up first. If we don't have anywhere to park, our residents, our shoppers, the commuters, then the whole project really begins to go in the wrong direction. So we have to get that built first, and we've made that commitment to Nexus.
Thank you.
Before I get ahead of myself, Lisa, I guess I really should ask you that, although the applicant has agreed, in essence, to everything you've asked for, do you want to expand on anything in your memo, or do you feel satisfied based on their...
No, just one thing. Under general comments, page 3, number 4, with regards to traffic, I know that's always a sticking point with everybody, especially the public. If you could maybe, Mr. Castillo, talk about some of the things you might do with regards to timing of the lights, because that's always an issue. Given the amount of residents you're going to have, in addition, as a change from a garage to now residents and retail, if you do propose to talk to the DOT about timing of the lights at Lake and New, and if it's even a requirement to do, if you could explore that with the DOT.
I think what I'd like to do is to direct the questions to our traffic consultant. Maybe he can have some...
We have a traffic engineer on the agenda,
Oh.
two witnesses down, so I think
Okay.
that we'll defer that to him.
Okay.
Again, he studied the surrounding intersections, so I'm sure.
You are going to provide testimony. I just wanted to make sure, because I don't want you to get bombarded with the questions from the public, just so they know that up front.
That's an excellent point. I guess one of the things is we haven't finished asking the planning board members to ask their questions, but it's important to point out that the next witnesses will be a landscape architect, a parking garage designer, and a traffic engineer, so that if you have questions that relate to those issues, we want to hold them for those witnesses who can speak to them. And for now, we can ask questions of Mr. Castillo about the site engineering. But I digress. Board members do have other questions for Mr. Castillo. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to open the public portion. If you have questions about the site engineering, please come up to the microphone and share them with us.
Remember, the same rules apply. I see Mr. Sam was there before, so he doesn't have to
Yes.
sign in again. But anybody else who comes up to ask a question, please remember to state your name and address and sign in.
Yes, no need to sign it twice. Okay, that's all good.
Good thing I caught you then.
Thank you. Bill Salmon, 23 Bounty Street. What is the density of the project? Units per acre?
That, you know what, I'll have to...
It's on the plans.
Would that be a question for your traffic engineer or for Mr. Castillo?
That's a question for our ace from Woodmont Properties.
Ballpark.
Steve doesn't do ballpark.
Bill Gross for the entire tract
What is it?
before the piazza. That's what.
It's about 50 to 55 units.
55 units to the acre?
Right.
Okay, thank you. You talk about the cul-de-sac you're creating there. I guess the number one question, is this an RSIS project?
Yes.
Yes, and does the cul-de-sac length and the cul-de-sac width conform to the RSIS standards?
As far as we understand, yes.
What's the width of the cul-de-sac? My question goes back to someone had a firefighting question. Basically, that's the reason for the question.
And maybe to clarify a little bit, as far as the grading here, this is essentially a flat tabletop area. So
Yeah, I
we
don't care about
have
the grade. I
curbs.
care about the length and the diameter cul-de-sac.
Let me just jump in. The fire official has the full set of plans. We've started to get some comments. The initial reaction, frankly, was that they're probably never going to bring an engine in between those two buildings. We designed that tabletop at the end to allow a garbage truck to be able to make a full rotation, so certainly would handle a pumper truck. It's not going to handle a big ladder truck, nor would we expect fire safety to come in there. But that ultimately will be the discussion and the final review of the fire.
Okay, is it RSIS compliant?
It is RSIS compliant.
Okay, thank you. What's the separation of the buildings, the east and the west?
East and the west.
Yeah, on the cul-de-sac.
You know what, I don't have a...
Does everybody have a scale?
Any scale with me on there?
Okay, then the cul-de-sac is not compliant. If the building width is 70 feet roughly, I don't believe you're compliant. You probably need a de minimis exception from the size. A question, how far are the buildings from the rail?
The buildings on the rail, they're less than... I don't have a, you know what, I don't have a scale in front of me.
You have 12 guys, somebody's got to set up. To the rail, physical rail.
Visible rails.
Or to its gray shade.
gray shade is the road.
Bill, the gray shade is the service road.
Is this
Off the rail.
Oh, okay.
Approximately 30 feet.
So from the face of building to the rail is to the railroad, back to 30? No, that's the driveway leading to it, so. Yeah, the rail's not on the site.
We'll look at that again.
He's talking about this whole.
Okay. And are you providing a buffer
Whether or not
along
it's
there?
in conformance.
There's,
The rail actually goes up the hill,
yeah.
so the answer is no, we can't possibly cover the track just because it's a car.
Okay.
Possibly.
Why are you doing a three-lot subdivision?
The an-
It might be for Steve.
Yeah, that's fine. The three-lot subdivision, you know what, I think this is happening, Anthony, because this microphone is getting close to that microphone. The three-lot subdivision, as I indicated before, is, one, the piazza needs to be its own lot, if for no other reason, so that it can be granted an easement for the public access. And the parking authority, the parking garage under, this is a very typical arrangement, parking authority will hold the title to the ground underneath the parking deck, and the and Nexus will have a lease, and then I think after 30 or 35 years, the deck reverts back to the parking authority, which, Len, is a really good deal for you, by the way. So that's why, it's three different pieces, it's three different ownership structures.
So you're going to dedicate the open space back to the town?
As I indicated a few minutes ago, there's not a firm plan on that. That's a conversation we'll have with the council. The property will either stay with the parking authority with a public easement, we'll own it with a public easement, or it'll be transferred to the town.
Who will have maintenance responsibility in perpetuity?
That's a conversation that we're currently having right now with the town. It's our job to design and build and get it open. Certainly for big events, after big events and before big events, we would expect the municipality to handle setup of a stage and, cleanup of a big dance or whatever. Where we're headed right now, and this is a conversation that we were having with the planning department, the administration, is probably we'll accept maintenance responsibilities for the first 5 years to get it up and get everything growing, make sure the trees have taken, and so on and so forth. Then we'll have sort of natural maintenance responsibilities, because we'll have folks on site and we'll have retailers there. But then the conversation we're having now is that the borough, at the end of the day, would have the maintenance obligation.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, that it's designed to be relatively maintenance-free.
You talked about decreasing runoff in accordance with the regulations, but you didn't talk about the capacity of the existing system. Does the existing storm sewer system work today? So basically, does the runoff generated by the parking lot get into the storm sewer, doesn't surcharge, and flows down, I guess would be westerly to McDade's property?
Well, it does make its way down there at some point. What the analysis that I did was assuming that during a peak flow event, for example, a 25-year storm, or let's say a 10-year storm on the site, you had a condition where the pipe underneath New Street happened to be surged. So I want to understand in that condition what would happen. So
Well, I guess the question is, does the piping system in New Street surcharge today or tomorrow?
It does surge.
It does surge.
It does surge.
Okay. The density again was 60 units to the acre?
55 units per acre.
55. So in the same theory, if the sanitary sewer you said has proper capacity, if that was undersized, similar to the storm sewer, would you replace the sanitary sewer?
Say it again, I'm not following.
If you said the sanitary sewer is properly sized
That's
to
what
handle the development.
That's what was represented to me, yes.
If it wasn't, would you replace it?
If it wasn't,
Correct.
that's something I really cannot prepare to answer that right now. I have to look at that a little further.
So you're saying you don't know if these people could flush a toilet?
No, you're comparing apples to station. No one is flushing the toilet on that parking lot right now. So if we were to put up 283 residences that are all going to flush the toilet, and there needed to be an increase in capacity in the sewer line, of course that would fall back to us. Otherwise, if there wasn't adequate sewer water, we would do it. Right now, 100% of that lot is paved,
Right.
and the water is going where it's going. We are decreasing that by 15% and almost, over 3/4 of an acre of impervious. So we are in a situation out there that it's our understanding that when it does surcharge on occasion, it's not an issue. Certainly, we don't want to make a $55 million investment and have flooding down there. So we're improving the situation as it exists today, but we don't think it rises to the level of digging up and putting in, whatever, playing the pipe a bigger number. And frankly, no one in the town is suggesting that. So I don't know if you're suggesting that. You have more knowledge than us, and we certainly have that conversation.
Well, I'm just saying that I'm making the comparison for the sanitary sewer with the storm sewer, saying you don't want to upgrade an insufficient system today for a property that's getting 60 units to the acre. Again, I got to state the comments. How long will it take to build a project?
Soup to nuts for the day we actually leave, I'm going to say probably about 24 months.
Okay, and
That depends on the winter. 24 months.
Right. And you're going to have typical construction vehicles,
24 months.
Dump trucks, cranes, and concrete and all that stuff. Okay. And the proposal, I kind of missed the proposal, it was to improve mill and overlay New Street half width. Did I hear correctly? Or?
No, the question, it's curb to curb. The question is how far down the street.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Other members of the public have questions that relate to the site engineering?
Hello again, Hussein Ali Khan, 15 Ohio Avenue. You mentioned something about garbage collection, very briefly. Could you just explain to me how garbage is going to be collected, and then how the dumpsters or whatever you're using to accumulate the tenants' waste is going to be managed?
That was me, and whenever you answer more than the question, you get more questions. So I deserve it. So all garbage collection on the site is private. We're not entitled to a contribution like a townhome community might be, so we don't get any money back from the town. The beauty of having private collection is that our contract says exactly when we want them to come, how many times a week, and what times they come. So we'll typically have chutes with compactors, then we'll have garbage collection, not at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning. We'll compel the garbage collection to come probably between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. when most of our residents are out at work. The garbage will be picked up definitely for the east building down the center, and we've designed that cul-de-sac, a teardrop, to be able to make sure that that garbage can make the loop. Perfect scenario? Definitely not. That's going to be a beautiful spaced area, and 4 times a week, garbage truck's going to go down it, but that's life. We have to get rid of the refuse. On the other side, there's an area on Pearl where we may bring the garbage to that area, or we may just have the garbage truck make a loop, bring it out of one building, and then bring it out of the other building. So the answer is chutes, compressor, private hauler.
So individuals
Bring their garbage down the end of the hall, drop it in the chute.
So people bring their garbage, drop it in the chute, you guys collect it from the compactors. I'm just wondering, you said something on Pearl Street that there would be like a dumpster or something down there?
There's services on Pearl Street, mostly for the retail. You can see on that plan. We've carved out, an area back there that could be for retail service, retail refuse, and if we haven't quite decided, but possibly some of the the residential refuse, if the dumpster's big enough, may go in there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Wait, we have a board question, I'm sorry.
Can I ask, just to further on the garbage question, not to beat a dead horse, where is bulk pickup for garbage for your residents?
The likelihood is we will not have bulk pickup. The lease will, obviously there's a refuse section and that'll determine.
Yep.
But if somebody's got to get rid of a bed or whatever, I'm sure, you may have, that's a great service, right, when you own a single-family home, but you won't get that with us.
So it's on the resident to figure out what to do with it?
Correct. And we'll help them, there'll be maintenance people in the building, but it's not going to end up on the curb.
How many maintenance employees are in the building?
Well, we'll probably have 2 full-time or 1.5, but we'll have one who lives there full-time, who's there 24/7, Christmas Eve, whatever. And then we'll have another maintenance person, maybe full-time, maybe 3/4 time, and they may spend, a couple days a week up in Cranford at our community up there. So, whatever we find the needs to be. Typically, brand-new buildings don't require a tremendous amount of maintenance. You're helping residents, managing the move-ins, making sure people are, we direct the move-ins. You can only move in when we say you can move in. You can't move in Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon with a rental truck and your buddies bringing stuff up the elevator. So that's sort of what, for the first 7 or 8 years, they're doing anyway.
Okay. Who's first?
I just want to follow up on one of Mr. Salmon's questions, and basically I want to ask our engineer, is there any design issue with Woodmont Way in terms of conformance with any state standard or road standard that
I will
have
tell
to
you,
meet?
no, but we're going to check that based upon the question.
I think there was another question at the end, was I? No? I'm wrong? Okay, other questions regarding site engineering from the public? Oh, we have one, here we go.
Daniel LaBar again, 581 Middlesex. Is there going to be testimony subsequently on environmental due diligence with regard to this property?
We hadn't planned it, but I can certainly give it to you since we did it at Woodmont.
All right. Questions that I have in that regard, two, basically. Has there been a determination through soil borings or percolation, I understand may have been done here, as to at measurement of the extent of the automobile accumulations over the 50 years that there's been parking there, in addition to prior industrial uses that may have existed before the parking lot was established, perhaps 1930s, 40s, 50s, some sort of truck parking or truck services may have been there. Were there any of those residues sunk into the ground, affected groundwater, maybe currently flowing to Dismal Brook since the water table is fairly high there? And if so, what mitigation strategies are going to be used to address that?
So when you develop near the train, which we have a fair amount of experience doing, there's always two problems. Well, there's usually two problems. One is you end up with a lot of smaller lots that needed to be consolidated because older style downtowns and areas around the train typically tend to be small lots that don't accommodate transit villages. The parking authority has done that for us years ago. So that's one down. Two is you will always, 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 always find some type of hazardous material or environmental waste that's in the ground. We have done a phase 1 and a phase 2. We took soil samples, water samples, and so on and so forth. What is in the ground is historic fill, which is very typical near the train. In the old days when nobody knew any better, they took construction debris and so on, and they used it to level out the site, maybe to raise the site a little bit. There's nothing, PPEs, TCEs, any of those types of materials. There's a couple of areas where where we call them unsuitables, where the construction debris might not be adequate to hold the building, so we will be doing some removal. And we'll also have to bring in fresh fill to handle that. And we have an agreement with the parking authority because typically you can do the best analysis of that and figure out the best, most economical way to handle it while you're in the field, so that you're not paying to haul off clean soil, you're testing as you go. So we anticipate that work, the environmental work, to be about $500,000 to $600,000 in addition to what we would normally have to deal with as standard site costs. The water, because it's historical fill, it's just a natural that there's a deed restriction, which just means no one can ever put a well. We couldn't sink a well to use that water and give water to our residents to bathe or drink potable water, which frankly no one thought about anyway. So that's really the answer to that. Just also for the board's edification, and I know you've probably all heard this as board members, we do have an LSRP that's working on the site. You submit a remedial plan as to how you intend to deal with any environmental contaminations. Again, what we have here is not, hair-raising or show-stopping. And then the LSRP blesses that plan and is actually in the field when you effectuate the plan and gives you a clean bill of health, which is then submitted to the DEP. DEP has audit rights if there's a concern. But that LSRP has a license, much like Mr. Renaud has a license, and if he were to stray, any defalcations could lead to him losing his license. So they're pretty stringent.
Maybe just explain that acronym for the public.
Talking about mayor of the LSRP.
Right.
There we go.
A licensed site remediation professional.
There we go.
Well, my question is slightly different than what you've answered, which is whether the automobile residues from the last 50 years of use currently present environmental questions. Also, whether there may have been, as yet, abandoned underground storage tanks from older uses or older buildings that were there, leaking underground storage tanks you don't yet know about because you haven't done, radar penetrating ground analysis. Those kinds of questions have not been resolved either then, I gather.
No, I'm laughing with Mr. Graziano because we did do UST underground storage tank testing, and it actually was a bump in the road because it was a day when there was an event in the parking lot, and there was a little bit miscommunication, probably my fault, more than the parking authorities. But the answer is there are no underground storage tanks on the site. We've done all that testing, and we have not found a preponderance of gas, engine oil, leaking oil. To the extent there's any, it's caught up in the asphalt, and it'll be, removed and recycled as part of that process.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Other members of the public with questions relative to site engineering?
Yeah, Richard Fleckner again, Oak Avenue. Apropos to the question that Dan just asked with regard to pollutants, that used to be Friedman Trucking, and there were a lot of big, heavy trucks stationed there. Have there been sufficient drillings to determine whether or not there are pollutants along particularly the part of the lot along the railroad?
Yes, Judge. As I indicated, we did a Phase 2. What a Phase 2 environmental study is, just so for those who may not know, that is taking soil samples, drilling down, pulling soil samples from around the site, basically Swiss cheesing the site to determine if there are pollutants, what the horizontal side-to-side amounts of those might be, as well as vertical. So based upon those results, where we did find, as I indicated already, almost all what's called historic fill, I'm sure you've probably had more than one trial on that in your day, is what's there. And that's our remedial action plan, which has already been prepared, and we're ready to effectuate that. As I indicated, $500,000 to $600,000 we're estimating in cost.
Okay, the other question I had is relevant to the piazza. The piazza is half an acre, which is one single-family building lot, basically. It's not a huge piazza. It's not San Marco.
Definitely not.
Have enough people to fill it.
I'm wondering, with retail establishments emptying out onto it and making use of it, I would assume, and particularly if there's a bar and restaurant in there, how this is going to fit in with other public uses. Is there enough space there?
We think that it's, frankly, that we didn't come up with the size. It was in the RFP, but we think it's the perfect size. You wouldn't want San Marco in a community of the nature and size of Metuchen. You wouldn't want Central Park in the middle of downtown Edison. They don't fit in scale and they don't fit in use. So we think it's perfect in that it can expand to hold the farmers market, concerts. I know Jim's talking about Super Bowl parties, but it can also be a cozy feel, which we wanted as well, because 330 days of the year, there ain't going to be no big event in there. So we're going to want it to be trees, soft lighting. You could bring a book, you could meet a friend, you could bring your lunch, you could buy something in town or at one of our retail establishments and eat them in the piazza in a cozy feeling. So I personally, again, we didn't design the size, but I think it's exactly perfect for the scale of our building and the scale of your downtown.
And then it's yet to be worked out who's going to do the cleanup and maintenance.
Well, I just indicated where we are on that. I think we're pretty close to an agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the public regarding site engineering? Please come forward and give us your name and address, please.
Thank you. Brian Weeks, I live on 33 Beechwood Avenue. I wanted to return to the question about drainage, and I wasn't sure how much you guys know about the history of the drainage problems in Metuchen. There's been a constant problem. Mr. Castillo, you pointed out how the drainage tends to go toward the west, which is the area where there used to be a supermarket. Chronic flooding problems between the former Blockbuster and the supermarket, and at the intersection, Lake Avenue and Route 27. So that's kind of down gradient from you guys. That's kind of the background. Are you aware of that? Is the first question. And then have you looked into the pipes that go down that way to see what's the problem?
The answer to the first question, yes, I was recently made aware of it. But number two, the answer to the study of the pipes, what we, in terms of the analysis of the pipes, we took the approach of just looking at the existing 3-foot pipe that's under the road and assuming it in a charged condition, surcharge condition, and adding our loading to it and seeing what the effect was. We did not go further downstream.
Well, I think the context may be shown better in your aerial photo. I believe it may have been your Exhibit A2, which shows that your property as well as the next property down gradient are all in line to be redeveloped. So it's sort of one of these, I wouldn't want it to be one of these falling between the cracks issues where you don't look at it because you're up gradient, and then the next guy comes to build down gradient and he's already flooded by what has already happened. So the flow goes down through, you see the roof of along the western edge, you see the roof of the former Blockbuster structure, exactly, right where your pinky is. Okay. So that area from there up to the upper left-hand corner of the photo shows the area. And there was a former supermarket on the corner there, the black roof, yep, okay. Right there. Mm-hmm. Always smelled bad. Big drainage problem right there so you have the drainage going down in that direction. So will that be addressed at some point through this? I guess the concern would be to do all this nice development of yours, and then your buddies down the road will be also constructing and then placing all this new development into an area which already we know has a chronic flooding problem. Not to mention the issues about moving the heavy machinery over the road. I know you're talking about remilling the surface, but all that activity may damage the pipes further underground. So I'm just raising this as a concern and wondering if it doesn't sound like there's been a consideration of those cumulative impacts that might exacerbate it. You just don't want to have a problem when you go ahead. It sounds like a nice development.
No question that we'll have to give it a little bit more of a look, but what I can tell you too is you're only as good as the next pipe. So to the point earlier,
you're surrounded by bad pipes, unfortunately, my friend.
If we were to put in a pipe on new, mm-hmm. that was 50% bigger than the existing pipe. If it flows in to an 8-inch pipe, it's going to recharge no matter what happens. It's a system.
Well, the good news is, I don't mean to cut you off, but just local knowledge, you're in luck in a way, because just on the other side, past Borough Hardware, is where much of that water flows into the Dismal Swamp. Mm-hmm. So it's not that far to the ultimate egress of the water. And
there is a plan to improve that. In fact, we've already debated this fair share issue of this.
Yeah, and I don't know the background, so I'm not going to get into that.
So from that, and I don't know the exact delineation of that, I know some of the applications downtown to bring a bigger quantity there. So
yeah, where is the boundary and who does what? But again, it sounds like an issue that I'd like to bring to your attention, not being from the town. You may not know it's been a chronic problem. And then, of course, just behind you on Main Street, any half-decent rainstorm and Main Street closes. So whatever pipe is behind you floods. So you got flooding behind you, flooding around you, you're kind of a little island there, and then you're going to run all this equipment over the street. So good luck with that. Yeah, thank you.
Other members of the public would like to ask questions relative to site engineering.
I want a discount.
Anyone else from the public? Sir.
If I may make a comment on this water situation. Joe Mitchell.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
You don't have the problem, and you don't have a problem, right? Your pipes are adequate. The problem is the downstream water in the Dismal Swamp is the problem. and that's a DEP problem. Try to get a permit to clean that out from the EPA, it'll be old and gray, and we'll all be dead by the time that happens. But that's where the problem is. It's the downstream water doesn't get out fast enough to let the upstream water flow. So your pipes are adequate.
Thank you. Other members of the public ask a question regarding site engineering? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion.
You want to take a little break?
And then we have several requests for a recess, so I'm going to say let's recess for 5 to 10 minutes and regroup. Testimony can be introduced after 11. So
I'm going to
gonna-
speak fast.
I'm going to leave it up to you to use that time constructively.
Okay, before you bring the next witness, I just want to get one issue sort of out of the way, and I want to make sure that I understand, or I think I understand from hearing Mr. Santola, that we're essentially deferring agreement on maintenance of the piazza, and that you will agree that we'll make that subject to what you will agree with the municipality and a developer's agreement, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is that all right with the board, I
It
trust?
certainly seems to pass muster with the board. Any questions or comments about that?
No, but I imagine that that will be a condition of the approval.
Yeah, it will be a condition of the approval, while the developer's agreement will be a condition of the approval, and then the agreement with respect to the maintenance of the piazza will be a condition of the approval, subject to the developer's agreement. And for those who might not know, the developer's agreement will be with the municipality.
Here we go. Back to you.
Okay, I'd like to call Thomas Carmen.
Good evening.
Ready to be sworn.
You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Carmen, can you state your full name, his address?
Sure. My name is Thomas S. Carmen. I'm a principal with Melillo and Bauer Associates. Melillo and Bauer is located 200 Union Ave in Brielle, New Jersey. I'm a licensed landscape architect in the state, graduate from Rutgers, and have attended numerous planning board meetings on applications somewhat similar to this in terms of plazas and open spaces.
Welcome to the board, Mr. Carmen. We'll accept you as an expert witness.
Thank you very much. So I'm really excited to be here and explain in detail some of the attributes to the plaza and how it does work with the original guidelines from the RFP and kind of embraces the design of the shared space concept. What I'll do is walk you through the overall design, and then I have a few images, like perspective images, that show how this potentially could be used in concept during the farmers market and during other events. So just to orient, New Street at the top and Pearl Street on the right-hand side. The design is consistent with the original vision for the RFP. Half-acre plaza is designed as a classic hard-paved piazza surrounded by New and Pearl Streets. The treatments of the streets visually extend the public space across to the other side of the street, and this is really achieved by using some complementary paving materials within the piazza and as well as within the street, the shared space. This further is reinforced by New Street and Pearl Street, the curb that runs along between the piazza and the street. That's going to be a flush curb. So it really creates an expanse of pavement, allowing at certain times the Metuchen has the opportunity to shut down some of those streets possibly, and letting that really spill out for larger festivals. And again, the idea of it having a shared space where the vehicle and the pedestrian at times can kind of coexist there. So although we designed this space as one, we really looked at it as kind of three different zones. The first zone is the streetscape zone, right? And that includes the streets themselves as well as the sidewalk treatment. Sidewalk is through an extension through an alley of trees. Being that, as I mentioned, that it's a flush curb along the street and the piazza, there are elements to define that. And it's textured pavement, it's bollards, planters, street trees, the lampposts that really delineate the space from the car to the pedestrian. The second zone would be the central core of the piazza right here, the large open space area where, again, a lot of the functions may occur, farmers market, any informal gatherings or larger planned gatherings. And then additionally, the retail zone right along the facade of the building. So there was a question earlier about the retail and how people come out to there. It's a comfortable zone coming out of the retail at that piazza space. And there are just there are 6 trees right there. They're honey locusts that create a soft separation between the center of the piazza and that retail zone. Ideally, like spoken earlier, a nice restaurant in there with some cafe seating really would enliven that space further. This is a perspective image looking back at the architecture, looking back at the retail. I'm at the intersection of New and Pearl, and what this shows is how we're really extending that piazza out to the roadway. The patterning of the pavement in the piazza extends out, and the patterning within the road designates parallel parking spaces as well as the crosswalks. This textured pavement that's within the roadway itself, where there was discussion earlier about the milling and the repaving. What this is a specially formulated polymer cement product that has aggregates in it, pigments in it, and engineered fibers. What it does is it's put down in this pattern over the asphalt, and it's a really, really durable, extremely durable surface. It's durable to freeze-thaw, to petroleum and salts, and it's used in a number of applications throughout the state. It's used in Chatham. It's used in it's actually been established in Jersey City as their standard for crosswalks and medians and decorative intersection treatments like this. And the one intersection at Jersey City actually sees about 60,000 cars a day going over it. So it's also used by NJDOT, and I'm sure we all can envision how rigorous NJDOT is with some of their detailing. So it's a great product for this. As I mentioned, that the patterning, although it's complementary material, the patterning continues into the pedestrian plaza space itself. But the pedestrian plaza space within at that curb line and to the building, that's all a more traditional paver treatment. So it's more of a neutral paver that complements the architecture as the field, and then some more traditional brick bands that really complement downtown Metuchen, and are the extension of down into or up to Main Street. As mentioned earlier, the street lights are the Metuchen-style street lights. So along the curb, along that tree-lined curb, those lights would be that decorative Metuchen-style light. And then within the piazza itself, as we get back towards the retail, really want to create a nice ambiance and kind of a low level of light. There'll be some light from the architecture, but then also maybe some indirect pole lights to cast a low level of light by those 6 trees. And then also based on some recommendations from the planner, town planner, Mr. Constantine, we're exploring the idea of doing some string lights, more festival lights over by those trees to really create kind of a magical space in the evening. Site furnishings, planters along the edge to help define the road to the pedestrian area, bollards, the lights, tree grates, bike racks would be located for visitors, and then some benches and some movable seating as well.
Could you just explain what's going on right here?
Sure. Right in that location right there, again, the pavement is all flush, and the bollards define the edge of the roadway, as do, we're actually potentially bringing some of the planters out into that area to define the parallel parking space, and just to kind of narrow that space down by the paving pattern in the cartway. By adding the bands, again, we're narrowing that pavement down, which provides some traffic calming in the area. The planting within the piazza, the alley of trees along the road frontage are Zelkova, and they're in a cast iron tree grate. The 6 trees towards the back are a honey locust. It's a very light leaf to it. Gives some nice dappled shade, and then under that is just a lush ground cover planting, simple evergreen hedge. So as Mr. Campbell mentioned earlier, it's really about doing some simple design with using some nice materials.
Are those, are the kinds of vegetation, are they outlined in the landscape plan, or do we need to detail them?
The planting within the piazza is shown on the landscape
Okay,
plan.
so the board can just refer to that. Thank you.
This graphic right here illustrates a concept for the farmers market. So right before the 4th of July, one of the guys from my office visited the farmers market and saw that the tents set up with some movable furniture out there, and this concept, one of a few concepts in terms of how this might be able to be arranged, but certainly this locates 22, I believe, like 10 by 10 tents. Certainly more tents could be located between that alley of trees, and then having the movable furniture. We've got an image of what this looks like, a kind of a character perspective looking from this area back towards New Street. And this would be that graphic right there. Residents of Metuchen enjoying a beautiful day at the farmers market. Then a larger scale event, again, flexibility being one of the key components to the design of the piazza. A larger scale event could be something like this, where here we're closing off New Street right in this location, and it could be closed off down at the end by Central. So just this area could be closed. Could be a street fair happening there with some food trucks along the curb, some street fair tents, and then potentially set up a stage in this orientation. Again, flexibility. There are many locations that a stage could be set, but this orientation right here, we felt that Pearl Street could remain open and provide access to the garage. Have a stage, line up some chairs, the retail being vibrant, people milling about. Another possibility would be to close both streets down. Certainly a stage could be located here where you could fill the whole space with a lot of people enjoying a event. A smaller scale event, keeping the roads open. A stage could be located right here, and some seating directed at that. So flexibility being the key, and I think we've really achieved a good balance of that here. We have, the next view would be from the food truck over here, kind of looking back at the stage. So right here, we see New Street in the foreground, that flush curb that we spoke about, the paving pattern delineating where a parallel stall would be, the Metuchen-style light, planters, tree grates, taking that vehicular pavement and carrying a similar patterning into the plaza space. The movable seating or actual arranged seating for an event in this location right here, looking at a stage. Retail frontage over there, and then the honey locust with a simple underplanting. So in general, I mean, that concludes my direct testimony on the piazza. I think it's going to be a great space for the community to really enjoy and have a bunch of different events, Junebug Festival and all the different things that.
Good, okay. Board members' questions for this witness?
Right now, and I don't know, Mr. Carmen, if you're really the person that can answer it, but right now we have on-street metered parking. None of your lovely rendition show the meters. Are they going to be removed? Is there going to be on-street parking? Do you anticipate on-street parking available on Pearl and New Streets?
We do envision that this would be parallel parking along New and along Pearl, and the parking meter could be yet another element that creates that kind of edge treatment. So in some of these locations, maybe instead of the bollard, it's the meter there.
So if the meters remain, you would work around them? Because obviously the ground treatment, you're showing going to the other side of the street.
That's correct. This curb line right here would be the existing curb line. So today, there's parallel parking, I believe, on New Street, and that would remain. It's just that it would be detailed on the ground plane differently.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Board members, other questions for this witness? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open the public portion. If you have questions regarding the landscape architecture, please come on up and share them with us.
My name is Henry Chang. I live at 112 Lake Avenue. I'm with the Arts Council. This is we're very excited about this open space for arts events within town. I guess I have a couple questions for you. The first question was related to just how many people you would envision could fit into that sort of central area. For instance, when you had that rendition of the stage and then some chairs set up, what was like an approximate volume of people?
So that graphic with the stage, the actual number of chairs that we dropped on there, which was loosely spaced, was 230 chairs. All right, but using that area of the piazza space, using like a 20 square foot area per person, maybe like a 4x5 area for just a gathering, that ends up being about 500 to 600 people within that core piazza zone.
That's within the area that's sort of delineated by the tree boundary there, not bleeding into, for instance, the retail area.
Right, this area right here.
Right. Okay.
Now, certainly when it gets expanded out, or if you were to take this whole area as a half an acre, and which is 20,000 square feet plus, and apply that, that would be, and that's considerable amount of people. But again, that doesn't, we're not taking out the areas for trees and such. When a large event could occur, that overall area is about 36,000 square feet. So again, depending upon what kind of standard is used, if you use a 20 square foot standard, that's 1,800 people. Maybe 20 is too tight or so, so I mean, it could be, but.
So I reiterate the question about the public restroom. But yeah, okay. My second question, thank you. My second question would be around, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but it's about the piazza, and so I'm hoping that someone can answer this. It's about, for instance, if we want to schedule events for public use in that area, what would be the constraints around, for instance, noise generation or any other kinds of concerns around like events that happen at night, especially since there's a residential property that is immediately adjoining it, which was not really formally the case in downtown.
That's a really good question, and I think we'd start with the municipal ordinance. I'm going to presume, I can't say that I'm sure, that there's a noise ordinance. And then we'd have to have a conversation with the municipality. I mean, my sense of it is the municipality would schedule those types of events, and you'd make application through the town, whatever insurance they wanted, alcohol, however those events were going to be handled, they would be scheduled through the town. And I guess when it ended is really the key, right, or when it started. And we'd have to have that conversation with the town. But my guess is it would be, a 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night cutoff, where we would want any band to stop playing or so on, so that our residents could, get some sleep. Events hopefully wouldn't start before 7 or 8 in the morning. Weekends would be different than weekdays. But I guess that's a conversation we'll all have to have. I hadn't even really thought about that.
Right, and so I guess I would just ask that the Arts Council would be included in that kind of conversation, so I'm sure that we'd have input in
You
that.
guys planning all-nighters, or? I know your crowd,
I mean, realistically, just in all seriousness, I could envision events running to, let's say, 11, right? Or, it depends on the event and depends on the kind of the occasion, and so,
Right.
I
If there's
certainly
a
wouldn't.
band till 11, it's different than if there's, just milling about.
Right. I mean, for example, we have talked about, for instance, a summer movie series. And if in the summer, if you want a movie, you can only start when sundown occurs, which might be as late as 9.
Sure.
And if that were to happen, then that movie would certainly run to 11 or 11:30, depending on the movie. So,
You're right.
there are different kinds of events. And then, I would be concerned about, constraints on the use of that space if that's going to be proposed as a big sort of public gathering area. So, all right, that's it. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you
That's a
very
great
much.
point, and thanks for bringing it up.
Other questions regarding landscape architecture for this witness?
Nelson Lee, 16 Bounty Street. Thanks for the presentation, it's very informative. A couple of questions. One, I guess, relates to the landscape, the trees and such. I'm not a real expert in trees, the types of trees, but you mentioned you have specific species in mind. Can you sort of describe how tall they are and how bushy they are and things like that?
Sure. The trees that we selected for this street edge right here, that's a Zelkova. A Zelkova has a very vase-shaped habit, so it's upright, and the branching goes up, kind of arching up, so that way you get good view underneath that canopy. The trees over here are a honey locust, and the canopy, again, is higher, but it's very, very fine texture, so it allows light to come in. These along here, we were more concerned from a view perspective, and these we were looking to create a little bit of a dappled shade kind of effect.
Well, that's great. I think it sounds like you were definitely taking into account sight lines as you expand beyond the central zone, as you were describing, where you showed a stage and seating and such. Obviously, there's no trees between the seats and the stage, but then as you start to expand, you have these trees, and it sounds like you've thought about the sight lines.
Sure. I mean, that's something that just you have to contend with in terms of a design like this. And as it was said earlier, 300 and so many days out of the year, this space is gonna be, the roads will be open and cars will be circulating through as today. and it's going to be pedestrians milling about and enjoying a beautiful day. So you need to provide that. You got to kind of create that balance and have the trees there for those times. And maybe during a performance, there possibly are going to be some people whose line of view may be impacted by the tree. But I think we've really struck a good balance in terms of that.
Sounds great. Can you talk a bit too about the paving materials? You mentioned pavers, I guess, as those stripe aspects, but what are the larger beige areas?
This whole area is a paver field, so it's just made up of two different types of paver. There's a more neutral colored paver, which is the lighter tone, and then the reddish tone in the pedestrian area is a brick-like paver. So smaller module pavers.
You know, let me just add to that too. The neutral tones will be closer to like a 1x. I think I'm on the Downtown New Jersey Executive Board, and as we all sort of move forward with these sidewalk improvement programs that everybody has, a lot of brick or smaller paver styles create sort of an uneven rattle with a stroller or a skateboard or bicycle even. So we like the idea that some of the larger spaces will be a little bit of a bigger paver to create an more even space for folks that are, riding their bike or pushing a stroller or something.
And you're suggesting a 1 by 1 foot dimension?
Yeah, it would be 10 inch by 10, something like that. The red banding would be more traditional brick.
Okay. And then wearing my farmer's market manager hat, how would that impact trucks either being able to drive on or not being able to drive on that surface?
Well, the design in terms of the pavement once we get to a larger scale paver, we just have to make sure that the base is prepared adequately. Smaller scale pavers allow for vehicles to go on a little bit more readily, so we'll have to work through that.
The goal would be that, a pickup size style truck or whatever, we should be able to accommodate. I'm not sure people are going to be able to roll through, baby dump trucks.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions regarding landscape architecture?
Hussein Ali Khan, 15 Ohio. It looks like a great piazza. I'm looking forward to it. But I did want to respond to, I think, a question one of our board members made about parking meters. And your design does not include parking meters at this time. Is that correct?
No, wait, look, we haven't just had the conversation with the parking authority whether they're going to do a PayPal at the end of the block, which is obviously, all the rage now, or individual parking meters. If they want parking meters, we'll accommodate that. If they want a parking station, which might be more appropriate for that area, we'll accommodate that.
Okay, great. That's what I wanted to hear, is that, parking meters are so 1945, okay? Can we get away from that stuff and quit cluttering up the sidewalk with that junk? All right, so I just want to make it clear that it doesn't include it now, and I'd really like to see it not include them in the future.
I will tell you this. Every time I've seen the municipality go away from parking meters to PayPal, it costs more to park. So, be careful where you're with.
It's still a great town for parking.
Thank you. Other questions regarding landscape architecture?
Sean Massey, 93 Highland, Parking Authority Commissioner. We're working our way toward 1952 at the, we're on our way. We're making tremendous progress, all right? Parking management plan on the books. On the seating side of things, the seating program, you spoke to it briefly. Just in what you're going to have movable seats, benches. Can you just speak briefly to what you're planning on putting in there?
Sure. There would be, along the retail, that would be seating that would be by the retailer. Right? But from there would be, under these trees, there are benches. Along this area, there are benches that are located as well. These, on the perspective graphic, they're shown as backed benches, but they would want to be unbacked, so that way you could sit and look at the street or sit and look out at the at the piazza itself. Also, there would be some movable seating for the public right out in the center area.
Great, okay. And as far as the shade that those trees produce, did you do some kind of analysis where you ran it over the course of the day to see what kind of coverage you'd get at certain hours?
Yes, we have, and the best part of doing the movable seating is allowing people to move them around and get them under some of those areas. So they will travel through the space as the day goes by.
Okay, and lastly, and this maybe is not landscape per se, but it relates to the piazza. As far as height, it looks like it's just the one sloping space down toward the street side of things. Was any consideration given to slight variation in height, or a little step up, or little, artificial benches where you can sit, where it perhaps delineates the retail space or the restaurant bar area up top, like you see in a lot of public places similar to this?
The answer to that, I think, lies a lot in the liquor license laws. If you're going to expand your liquor license outside your space, it has to be carefully delineated.
Sure.
When you walk in Manhattan or Hoboken, they either have like a velvet rope set up,
Right.
or they get a fake picket fence or whatever. So we want to create as much flexibility in that area if they want a little bit more or a little bit less. For instance, in one of our projects out in Green in Morristown, one owner did 2 restaurants, and to our surprise, did great outdoor stuff at one and decided he didn't want it next door. It just didn't fit what his whole motif was and what he was doing. So the conversation that we've had for the last 18 months has been about flexibility.
Right.
No steps, no permanent benching, because we're going to all live with this for 30 years. And in 20 years, who knows what might be all the rage.
Sure.
Put a fountain in the middle or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with the general sense that you want to have flexibility. I guess the only point, well, I'll phrase it as a question. Is it prudent to give thought? We spoke to, 330 days a year, it's for pedestrians. You want to draw people in to hang out in the space. And usually, as a principle of design, variations in height, even if they're slight, they create that coziness, they create that intimacy in pockets of space where you can be, even if you're 3 feet above the guy that's sitting right in front of you, you have that delineation, and you're not right on top of each other. So it's just something I would put out there.
It's definitely an interesting thought. I think we'll look at it. If we
Sure.
can do it without moving away from the flexible concept, it's something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions regarding landscape architecture?
Just as a follow-up to the comment that was made, I know this was discussed in the past about utilizing this space, and I think the sentiment expressed was that we don't know what the future is, and I guess built-in flexibility was the best option in terms of considering the design of the space. And I think you can always create those levels with furniture or with movable objects and improvements that still don't deprive the space of being used in many different ways.
Very good. Okay,
Can I ask a question real quick?
you can.
I don't know much about trees. I like trees, but I don't know much about honey locusts or zelkovas, and it looks beautiful, and I imagine sort of fully grown trees and how beautiful and warm the piazza would feel. Are these trees that are going to come very small and we're going to have to wait for them to get large, or do you imagine planting trees? Can you plant these a little larger? Are they rapid growing trees?
The trees that are specified on the drawings are, for in the piazza area, are a 4-inch caliper tree, which is a nice sized tree for installation time. We have, the Zelkova are in a tree grate, so we're somewhat limited when you've got to put the ball of the tree into the ground and contend with the hardscape and the tree grate and that. So that's a comfortable size to be doing. It gives us somewhat of an immediate impact. Often, the standard is a 2.5 to 3 inch caliper tree. These are 4-inch. So, and then within the honey locust, those are in a larger planted area. So those we're able to put them in comfortably there. So.
Is there going to be any plantings actually on the building? You had mentioned the architect at the beginning mirroring this after an Italian courtyard. Is there any actual plantings on the building itself?
At the building facade, there will be a
Right.
number of planters that kind of accent the architecture, but also up on the rooftop, that trellised structure, that's where we're envisioning again some planting up there that I believe we were referring to.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions relative to landscape architecture, I'm going to say, board members, we're ready for our next witness. And thank you, Mr. Corman.
Thank you. I'd like to call Todd Helmer.
And I'll keep in mind we have 17 minutes for new testimony.
Thanks for testimony.
I do.
Mr. Helmer, can you give the board the place of business and special qualifications?
Sure. I'm a principal with Timothy Hazen Associates, 144 Livingston Avenue in New Brunswick, New Jersey. My background is an education background, structural engineering from Georgia Tech, 20-plus years of experience in parking planning and design, licensed in 7 states, including New Jersey, and have done testimony such as this and projects such as this in many municipalities and boroughs in New Jersey.
Board will accept Mr. Helmer as an expert witness.
Okay, thank you. Oh, is it? Do you have that? Do you have the plans in there? Oh, I didn't know the plans were in there.
You're not in there.
He wants to rent.
Yeah, I was going back to reference. That's okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, just to give an overview on the parking structure. The parking structure is housed to accommodate 750 vehicles. It's approximately 338 feet long by 120 foot in width. Is there a pointer? Do you have a pointer? Oh, there. Great. Yeah, like I mentioned, the length is approximately 338 by 120. Essentially what it is, it's a 6-level parking structure. Like I said, 750 spaces. The vehicular access to the parking garage is via Pearl Street on the southeast corner, as well as off of Woodmont Way on the northwest corner. There is gated access at each vehicular entry exit, which we can talk about as well in terms of from an operational standpoint, and Nexus can comment on that as well. The functionality of the garage is fairly straightforward, that being a two-bay parking garage. So the bay that's actually facing the residential is the flat portion. So when you come into the parking garage, you essentially come into the garage here and you go directly up the ramp. So the ramp of the parking garage, that 60-foot module, is on the back side of the garage, allowing flat space or a flat module that's facing the residential. The functionality in terms of driving, it's a two-way, 90-degree parking, 24-foot drive aisle within the garage. From an accessibility standpoint, of the 750 spaces, there's 14 accessible spaces required per IBC code, of which 2 of those are van accessible.
How many accessible?
14 regular accessible spaces and 2 van accessible spaces. The floor-to-floor heights in the parking garage, from ground to the first supported level, is 14-foot floor-to-floor. So subtracting the structure, you actually get a clear height within that ground tier of 11 feet, which essentially would accommodate any type of ambulance or emergency vehicle that would be coming into the garage that would be accessing either from Pearl Street or from Woodmont Way. The levels above are 11 feet floor to floor, which essentially accommodates an accessible van, or 8 foot 2 inches clearance. The parking garage is classified as open. One of the things that we wanted to maintain within the parking garage is natural ventilation. Try to include as much natural light into the parking structure as well. If it was considered closed, then you would have to introduce mechanical ventilation and an automatic sprinkler system. So that was one of the keys to the parking structure. Internally, it's a long-span parking garage, which means that sight lines are enhanced internally. So you see that within the parking garage, all of this area, with the exception of the interior grid line, is unobstructed. So essentially, you have a 60-foot module of 18-foot stall, 24-foot drive aisle, and 18-foot stall that's unobstructed with clear sight lines. We want to, in parking structures, in terms of design, try to maximize passive security to improve sight lines, to improve lighting. Where people are actually parking, we want to make it very convenient for them to walk to their destination. So that's very important. In terms of passive security as well, we have the elevators, the stair elevator tower in the southeast corner, which accommodates 2 elevators, and a stair tower in the northwest corner. Both of those are intended to be glazed and well lit. The 2 elevators that are down in the southeast corner will have a glass back to that. From the pedestrian point of view, as you would be parking and heading toward those areas, the intent on each level would be to have it wide open, so that when you park your car, you're walking into either the stair tower or the main stair elevator lobby unobstructed, not having to go through any doors, with the exception of the top level, which in both cases, we would have that closed with storefront system and glazed to protect it from the weather elements. In terms of the fire protection system, excuse me, it's an open parking garage, so essentially what you require per code is a manual dry standpipe system that's interconnected and basically coordinated with the borough and the fire marshal to have a Siamese connection at Pearl Street as well as one at Woodmont Way, should that be the case. And essentially what it is, it requires a standpipe here and here, a minimum per code at each stair, and then within the parking garage, at 100 foot of hose, 30 foot of spray. So essentially, within the parking garage, you'll have 2 additional standpipes. And it's all interconnected and energized. So for example, if there was an incident, the fire truck would pull up into the area of the Siamese connection, hook it up to the Siamese connection, energize the system. The whole system would be energized from a fire protection standpoint. From a lighting standpoint, it's very important that we try to maximize lighting in the garage, as well as try to minimize any type of spillage of lighting. What I mean by maximize it, typically what you find in parking structures is approximately 7 to 8 foot candles on average, which is a little bit up from the previous parking industry standards of 5 to 6. Within the stair towers, you typically see about 20 foot candles on average, which is a fairly well-lit, identifiable stair tower element that when you park, you'll be able to see that very well. At the entry exits, what's very important is that you have approximately 40 to 50 foot candles. Oh, I'm sorry. Just at the entry exit, you have that level in terms of 40 to 50. You have to make sure that, especially upon entry, you have light transition. So when you go from the sunlight into a parking structure, you want to make sure that you go from sun into an area that's somewhat well lit, and then proceed into the garage, and then you won't get the blind spots that you typically do. The overall height, I mentioned 14 foot, 11 foot on a typical level. So from grade to the top level parapet is 56 feet 6 inches. The top level parapet being 3 foot 6 inches above the top level of the parking deck. 3 foot 6 or 42 inches is code required fall protection in that respect. We are proposing, which can be spoken to by Nexus a little bit more, up in the northeast corner would be an office, an operational type of office that would basically be securing the garage, and the garage would be manned, in terms of 24-hour, security aspect. as well as, I should mention, active security measures. There will be cameras in the garage as well. The pedestrian connection, I mentioned each stair tower as an access point, that being 2 elevators required per the requirements of the use and of the demand of 750 cars from a residential and a commuter standpoint. One of the elevators will be accommodating a stretcher per accessibility requirement. The pedestrian connections to the residential are in 3 locations. One here at the southwest corner to accommodate access on each level of the parking garage to the adjacent west building, and then 2 on the northerly portion to accommodate access to the east building. In both cases, accessing into somewhat of a small lobby corridor space for that area. Just moving up the typical levels, you can see fairly straightforward in terms of the vehicular movements. You come into the garage, you go up the ramp. On your way up, you make right-hand turns to park. On your way down, you're going to be circulating in a counterclockwise fashion. Very user-friendly in that respect. I should mention that it is user-friendly. We try to minimize as much as possible any type of vehicular or pedestrian conflicts within the parking garage. The interior wall, I should mention, this wall right here, interior, it is a wall, it is a stack wall. We try to maintain many openings in it and as much as we can from a structural standpoint, so that if you are on the ramp, you still have the visibility down to the flat bay, and you feel very comfortable within the parking garage. Just from an architectural and elevation standpoint, Keith had mentioned earlier related to the architectural intent. The parking structure is contemplated right now to be a precast parking garage. The materials with precast lends itself to the contributing factor to sustainability. You can see that up in this corner here, as was previously mentioned, is typically it's going to be a buff color precast with thin brick inset that would be strategically located at the corners and at the stair tower elements. The other thing I wanted to mention, you can see here is what's called a shear wall. You may be in parking garages where you see internal walls. Well, again, to try to enhance the passive security measures, we try to minimize interior walls as much as possible, bring those out to the exterior, so we can use those as an architectural element. In this particular case, you can see the verticality in the architecture in terms of this end piece here, giving some substantial architectural intent. See the stair elevator tower in the back, and then there's that vertical shear wall on the exterior. So inside, you essentially just have that open wall, really no columns and really no walls, which is great from a security standpoint. We would expect, although not designed yet, as some signage identifier to the parking garage. As you come down Pearl Street as well as Woodmont Way, we would want for the public and the commuters to visibly see very tasteful, parking signs. So although not shown here, that is one element that will be forthcoming in the design. Okay, I think.
Mr. Chair, if it's possible, before we take questions, Mr. Germano from Nexus would complement Mr. Helmer's testimony. Perhaps I could have him on to talk operationally and then take questions about the parking structure as a whole.
Counsel, you have any objections?
No, I don't have any, if it's all right with you. I mean, if you look at the time, we're...
Well, I see Mr. Germano was only scheduled for 5 minutes. That's the only reason I'm considering it.
It's okay with you, it's all right with me.
Be brief.
But we'd like to call Dante Germano.
Of course, none of these times have been.
Eric, can we ask questions?
We can do whatever we want, okay? The idea is that the board is not supposed to consider new testimony after 11, so we can make a brief extension.
I'll say let's hear from Dante, and then if we have questions, let's do the questions. I know we'll go over the 11.
We all have questions for Mr. Helmer.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, before we do move on, I just want one question from Mr. Helmer regarding the stall sizes
Yes.
of the, and the parking structure.
Yeah. So currently in the parking garage, the stall sizes in terms of width, it's 8'6", which is typically standard size stall within parking garages. And in many garages that we've done throughout New Jersey that have accommodated commuter, residential, or other type of uses, the borough requires 9 foot. So that's an area that we would require a waiver for. So 8'6" by 18. In terms of the 18-foot depth, 24-foot drive aisle, that adheres to the borough ordinance.
Okay, don't go anywhere, Mr. Helmer. We have plenty of questions, but we'll hear from Mr. Germano.
You swear from testimony you're about to give in this proceeding, tell me the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do. I will.
Please state your name for the record,
Dante Germano.
and what's your role with regard to the project?
I am the Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer of Nexus Properties. We are will be the lessee of the parking garage from the parking authority, and will construct it, finance it, and manage it over the term of the lease.
Can you talk a little bit about Nexus?
Yes, I'll be very brief. I just wanted to give a little background about Nexus Properties for the board to understand our qualifications as in the parking business. We're real estate developers. We're a privately owned, family-owned business. Been in the business for 35, 40 years. We're actually real estate developers, not just parking developers. We develop residential, office, which actually helps us when we work with good folks like Woodmont here, because we can kind of be sensitive to what they need to do on the apartment side, because we develop multifamily as well. So we work well with other developers in doing the parking development. We currently own 4 parking garages, 2 in Trenton, one at the right by the Trenton train station, one at Hamilton at the train station there, one in Glassboro, New Jersey by Rowan University, and we manage the Metro Park station up here for New Jersey Transit. So I just wanted to provide that overview. Secondly, I just wanted to make one point on the garage, and then I'm going to turn this over to Mike Siselka real quick, who's going to talk about just security and operations. It'll only take 2 minutes, I promise. But quickly on the shared parking concept, because I know that came up in some of the questions that the professionals had. So the idea of a garage like this is to try and maximize the use of the spaces. So we have a residential use, obviously, with the apartments. We have the commuter use, and we'll have a retail use. Just as a point, on the first floor of the garage, they are 9-foot spaces wide rather than 8.5 to accommodate retail, which is more typical for that kind of thing. So we are kind of allocating a portion of that to a typical retail use, but not segregating them such that we'll have spaces empty that couldn't be used by another user. So these kind of garages require a lot of management, which we believe we're very good at, we have a lot of experience at, because you're constantly shuffling between the different uses of the garage in terms of when the resident is not there, you want to put a commuter there. When the commuter is not there, you want to put a resident there or a retail person there or anybody else that can utilize the space. So you actually can turn a 750-car garage into something much bigger in terms of its utilization. So that's the point. I'm just going to turn it over to Mike Siselka real quick. He's the president of Nexus Parking Systems, which is our company that operates
So I'm going to
the garage.
stop you there, Mr. Germano, because I haven't consented to any new testimony other than your own, and I'm going to ask the board if they want to hear that testimony. It's up to them. Okay, very good.
All right,
Proceed.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'll be very brief because I have a lot of passion for parking. Everybody who knows me from here, I really love the operation.
We got to swear you in first.
Yes.
I swear affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
And state your full name for me, please.
Yes, Michael A. Siselka,
Spell your last name.
CIESIELKA. All right, I'm president of Nexus Parking Systems. Experience in Nexus Parking Systems. I've been operating parking decks for 27 years for Nexus. So I'm going to be brief on about the operations. As Steve had said about his operation, they're going to be running 24 hours. The parking garage will be operated 24 hours with a customer service rep there 24 hours a day. So So basically what happens, any type of situation that can arise, we're actually monitoring the garage, as well as using technology to actually monitor the garage even more effectively. The biggest thing about us at Nexus and our biggest asset to us is that we use the latest technology. I know people say, hey, the parking technology in Metuchen is a little outdated. We bring the utmost of one of the top-rated technology. Technology is whether there's sensor on spaces about the commuter spaces of understanding how long they're in spaces. We bring that technology. Typically, the parking garage will be gated. We'll be using credit card in, credit card out. We'll be using an access card system for all our tenants, which are monthly permit holders as well as tenants of the apartments. All right, and I like to go more in the operations, but I know you probably have some questions about the interim parking plan, because the interim parking plan is really something that's major in making this development really work for us. About 18 months ago, I've been integrated into the borough of Metuchen, and basically I've been working with the parking authority looking at these situations. As Steve said, we'll probably be looking at a phase, which I was very happy that Steve said about a phase process. A phase process really does work for all of us, because I'm not taking the whole parking lot out of commission. We're only taking half. And typically the half of the parking lot, if you look at Center Street, right at the center, the part that is actually where the parking garage is, that's where the construction area would start. The remaining, it's about 220 spaces on the facility, would actually remain as active parking spaces. And what we would plan to do, there's 4 different issues and situations that we look at. How can we accommodate more spacing on the current lots that you have? So there's situations in where on the current Pearl Street lot as well as the Halsey Street lot, we would do some type of valet service. And valet service doesn't mean that you drop your car off at the train station. Basically, designated commuters or parkers would come to that lot. Basically what we do is they would as soon as the lot is filled into spaces, they would not leave their keys. Any spaces inside the lanes, we would allocate certain spaces in the lanes that customers can drive, park their car. Customer service would, hi, how are you today? They would actually take the keys and actually park their cars, adding probably about 100 spaces to each of the facilities, which would accommodate. The second phase is looking at the area and looking in the geographical area where we can find additional parking facilities. Currently, we've looked at the supply. We've done a lot of due diligence in the area, and we've currently looked at the parking counts, and we think that we can move some of the commuters as well as some of the town holders into certain lots in the area that you're currently using. What we also did is that we looked in the whole surrounding area, because eventually we're going to have to take the whole lot out of commission. And taking the whole lot out of commission is actually it's a number of parkers. In doing so, we think the only way to accommodate that situation is 2 ways. The first way is to make the availability. As you know, we run Metro Park. We got a great relationship with New Jersey Transit. We make available to them some spaces off-site, at least 100 at Metro Park, and maybe also at least 100 down at Edison. We've talked to them. We've done counts. There are spaces available. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a shuttle service. A shuttle service which would actually take customers. Basically what they would do is we'd give them set times. Basically would complement their train schedules. They would actually go to that location. Basically the shuttle service would actually take them from there either to the Pearl Street lot or somewhere in the geographic area which would give them a short distance to the train station. That would actually take a large number of customers. We were currently with the borough, have been working diligently with them. We found a location which is about 0.6 miles. We're currently talking to them about working things out for that. As I said before, the interim parking plan is an essential part. The hardest thing is estimating time and estimating how do we accomplish that. And by accomplishing that, the best way to do that is make sure that we get the schedules with Woodmont as well as Nexus, coordinate everything, and then decide whether we go with a phase process or do we totally move everybody off site. It's all determined on the construction schedule and how aggressive we want to be. And if there's any questions about operations, I can answer them too. I'm here available.
The question that I have is this. With respect to the interim parking plan, I'm assuming that you're going to either going to work it out or have worked it out with the parking authority, isn't that right?
Yes, we're actually, we become as an integral part into the parking authority. I will bring up actually operations crews here who will actually become the parking authority. We will actually be assisting them in that.
So although I think it's well that you would explain to the board and the public what we would do in the interim, I'm not sure that what the interim system is going to be, although the board may be interested in it, is not something that anybody's asking the planning board to either approve of or consider at this point. In other words, that's something you're going to work out with the parking authority.
Currently we're working with the parking authority. It's based on timing. It's understanding because there were some facilities that we were looking at, and we thought they were online. They went offline because, of course, like Whole Foods or something like that. You know, that facility right there at the Renaissance probably would be a perfect facility.
And Mr. Renaud, we were just trying to anticipate maybe questions or concerns from other board members or the public, and so that's why Mr.
Siselka, yes.
Wanted to speak about the...
Yeah, I understand. I'm sort of trying to eliminate, to the extent possible, questions about the phasing, because it's not really for the planning board, and my understanding is that the details haven't been worked out anyway.
Correct, and it will be worked out with the parking authority.
Okay.
And that's key.
Yeah, all key decisions have to be worked out with the parking authority.
Okay, so why don't we bring it back now till we can have board members ask questions of Mr. Siselka or also for Mr. Helmer regarding the parking garage design or the things that Mr. Siselka has described about operation, again, although the board doesn't have purview over that.
I have a question for Mr. Helmer. Roughly how long will it take for the parking structure to be built?
Typically, a garage of this size, 750 spaces, would be approximately up to a year, 12 months. It could be less, could be between 10 to 12, but essentially from cordoning off the site, putting up the fence, to certificate of occupancy, it could be as much as 12 months.
Okay.
I want to commend you for a good IES design guideline practice following there with the transitions and the contrast ratios and the lighting. What is the lighting media that you're going to be using in the deck?
We'll most likely be looking into LED.
Okay.
LED lights, which is most up-to-date technology.
Like a canopy-type fixture, or, again, I don't know what the ceiling media is and if there's recesses and cutoff angles and things of this nature for a passerby.
Yeah. So essentially, the light, as it'll be mounted in the garage, will be mounted about 1 inch from the bottom of the floor system. It's a T system, so it'll be down about 1 inch just above that, so you still maintain the clearance within the parking garage of 8'2" throughout. It'll have a downlight and an uplight component to that.
Okay.
Okay, so typically it's 2 rows down each aisle, right behind essentially the trunks of the car. Okay, and from the outside perimeter, you'll have a cutoff. So we'll do a point-by-point foot candle layout that will basically show that we're trying to cut that off as much as we can to the parapet
Concern,
wall.
yes. It's less about the foot candle levels, which are malleable, but more about the cutoff angle and about,
Right.
As you said, light spill. So good, that's on our agenda.
The other thing to mention is that the top level, the light fixtures, we do not mount those around the perimeter. We mount those on the interior column line. Okay,
So we won't be seeing any shoeboxes up there anytime soon.
No, it'll be, maybe 15 foot high, probably about 4 of those, across 4 or 5 of those, but they're definitely not mounted on the perimeter of the garage, from a visibility standpoint as well as a light spillage.
Okay, very good.
I have another question. Will there be charging stations for electric cars?
There will be. At the ground tier, in this vicinity, right here, there will be charging stations.
Okay.
Correct.
And what about the rental cars, zip cars, or whatever will there be any of those?
At this point, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but no. The answer is no.
Okay.
There will be also bike storage within the garage.
Okay.
Convenient access from Woodmont Way, that would be like right in this area here. So you have bicycle storage, and then you'll have the electric charging stations right across the way.
I understand that the garage is designed, the structure, I don't want to say garage, but the structure is designed so that if New Jersey Transit extends the platform in the future, there would be a way to create an access to that platform.
That's correct. Right. So basically, the design of the main stair elevator tower, we would be looking at that fairly close to determine the provisions of that stair elevator tower to have an access to New Jersey Transit in the future. Right.
I see lots of other questions, please.
With regards to the landscape treatment along Pearl Street in front of the parking structure, and forgive me if you went over this previously and I missed it, could you talk to me about that, or talk to the board a little bit about that? What are you proposing in front of the parking structure when it comes to landscaping?
Personally, that I can't answer.
That's Mr. Corbett.
So I don't know if Dante can.
So initially on the, I think on the civil engineer drawings, it just showed lawn there. But through comments from Mr. Constantine, and we've reviewed with him, we are going to look at that area and do some planning. So we're going to work with Jim on basically doing that redesign on there.
Okay, thank you.
Ellen?
I do have a couple of questions. I think it was you, Mr. Helmer, who testified about when you have a mixed use, basically for parking. You have your residential, you have your retail, and you have commuter parking. How do you direct someone to an empty space? In other words, will there be times when every space is taken, or when, you know, you come in the afternoon and you're going shopping at the retail use, is there any direction for where you're going to park?
Well, I mean, the parking garage, there's no designated spaces within the garage. So based on any type of retail use, short-term, commuter, or residential users, they can park anywhere within the parking garage. The intent there, and I think Dante had alluded to it, was this shared parking methodology, so that, you know, throughout the day, I mean, you have residents parking here. Some of them will be living, parking, and then there'll be some of them leaving in the morning, which is essentially, could be up to, you know, 30% of those folks leaving, 30 to 40 possibly. Others that would be taking the train to their places of employment. Okay, so, and then you have commuters. So in the morning you have folks that would be leaving, then you have folks that would be coming to the train station as commuters to take the train to their places of employment. So there's complementary uses within the parking garage. I believe, you know, according to Mike, you know, in terms of the operations, the 24-hour operations of the garage, you know, there's going to be someone there, you know, if there is any question in terms of where they should park. But essentially, there will be available parking throughout the day. It's just basically no designated spaces.
Okay, so there really wouldn't be a time where someone's going to want to enter and park the car where it would say lot is full? I mean, sometimes, would that ever happen?
I wouldn't believe so. I mean, there may be occurrences where that could happen, and I think that's where management would take over, you know, with maybe a potential contingency plan for that.
As Dante said, we actually get very active in the management of the lot. Of course, there'll be signs in front of both of the entrances and exits. We'll say lot full and everything like that. We'll do some research basically on maybe trying to also include occupancy counts on those signs also. As you know, technology has really come high in the parking decks of checking occupancy levels and all that stuff. We have a sophisticated system that does the counting of the garage. So what we try to do best as managers is efficiently manage that garage, make sure there are available spaces. As Todd had said, our goal is not to always have available spaces, but there could be a situation that we don't. But as us working with the parking authority, it's our goal to work with them to provide that customer a space downtown. So if we know there's a space downtown, basically our management staff will assist them and direct them into that location.
Okay. I do have another question. Mr. Helmer, you started out by saying the flat side of the garage is, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Well,
The
so...
facade that's blank, or?
Well, essentially, if you look at a typical level, you have the ramp to go from one level to another is actually on the track side. So essentially, if I was driving my vehicle, I would be coming, this is all flat, on a flat, come around, and then you would go up the ramp, and then you would hit the level above. So what I meant by that was that this is the ramp back here that is a compliant parking ramp per slope.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Sure.
Now I understand. And one other question, on the rendering, where obviously it looks like windows, but they're not windows, they're just space, right? It's just an opening.
That's correct.
There won't be anything there.
That's correct. And the reason for that, I mean, we're a proponent of opening it up as much as possible, having openings. We do have enough openings right now to meet code-required openness. But because of the proximity of the adjacent uses, this particular building and the residential, the code requires that a certain extent of that elevation be closed per code from a fire point of view. That's why this is closed in this area. And basically, you have a situation where you have, it's solid, but it's to emulate the adjacent residential use.
Okay.
Thank you.
Getting back to Woodmont Way, and I'm not sure if you're the person to ask this, but is this a private road only for the residents of the Woodmont buildings, or is it private, meaning you're maintaining it? Will people be entering and exiting the garage?
Yeah, they will. First of all, obviously, anybody who's picking up or dropping off a resident is free to use the road. And if somebody wants to use that as access to the parking lot, they can do that too. I think, you know, the goal would be to try and bring them in on Pearl Street as much as possible, but they're both meant for that.
So typically, at a time when everyone's trying to get on a train, the traffic would be coming in from both Woodmont Way and Pearl Street to enter the garage?
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of speed, you know, do they, you know, come in and grab a ticket and go and, you know?
There it is, operations.
I figured it was, how many cars can, I think I remember you once giving us some information about how many cars can come through in a
Yeah,
certain
typically, as you well know, parking operation with gates and ticket machines, someone would take a ticket to come in. That exists now. They used to, what they'll do, the same thing, a person can take a ticket. When they leave, typically there used to be a cashier station there. Now basically what they can do is they can either go to a pay station, which will be located in the main lobby areas. You'll have two types of pay stations in the main lobby, which will be a full-blown, which will take cash, credit card. What's even great about the pay stations, there's a help button there. So that help button, so you don't understand how it's going to work or there's a jam on the ticket. Once they hit the help button, that's actually going to ring the customer service office and his cell phone. So even if he's helping someone else, he can assist the customer in doing so. There's also going to be one also over on that side too. There'll be also a pay station over there. So if customers go either way, say they're coming in from you know, an event, or they're coming in as a guest from an apartment dweller, basically they can pay at any location. The other way you can pay is by credit card. You can actually put your ticket in the lane and put a credit card right into the machine. So you don't even have to, you can bypass the pay station and go right there. And that's what's kind of unique about parking garages today with the equipment. It actually shows you that there's different payment streams, which actually creates a better exiting environment, because not everybody's, like right now, everybody's rushing the exit. That doesn't happen now in the garage, because if you got a rookie, and I call him a rookie in parking, they don't know what to do. So they're going to look around, they're going to go to a pay station. Anybody who's in there, the monthlies, or anybody who's done it before, they're going to go to their car, they're going to get out as quick as possible. So it actually helps traffic flow, getting in and out of the garage because of the different type of payment technologies.
Okay. And when I look at the map, the plan, I see there's really, most people would be going to that one exit so they could get to the train platform. What currently, is that still the way they get there now?
Yes, yeah, and that's the reason.
Continue to be that alleyway?
Yeah, and that's the reason why we placed the stair tower and everything over there. We don't want them crossing traffic, because you know that as well as I do. It's the same thing as, you know, we actually put the bike location in on the one side, because we don't want anybody crossing traffic in the lanes, because you know that. Person's trying to get in the garage, they don't see anybody in front of you. So that's the reason why it was placed
And so, and there's 2 elevators over there as well?
2 elevators in there, and that helps. As I said, with the security system, we also will have cameras on every level at every entrance door. So we pick up travel pass, as well as we pick up actually cars driving throughout the garage. So I estimate about 43 to 50 cameras in the garage. Our office is up in the right-hand corner. All right. Basically, it's placed there because, as like Todd said, since that level is flat, we can actually see the other exit in a plain view if you looked outside the office.
Okay.
All right, as well as its placement, so there's actually going to be a walkway from Pearl Street right into the office, because we're also going to share our office with the parking authority. Because what's going to happen is that right now, they're used to going to that window finding parking. We're going to be both customer service reps and assisting customers there.
And will there be illumination? I don't know if you're responsible for that, the path that now
Yeah,
gets you. Will that be upgraded and illuminated?
We will work with the park authority to maintain it, actually keep it clean. I mean, we're there 24 hours. Typically, our night guy, the 12 to 8 midnight guy, he's actually does a lot of maintenance in the garage. So he's going to handle all the cleaning, everything like that. We'll have a sweeper on staff, so we'll be sweeping the garage. So as well as the area around the station.
Thank you.
Okay. Jim, I know you had, oh, I see Alan reaching for his microphone.
Mr. Helmer? Just briefly, we saw the renderings of the deck from Pearl Street and facing the piazza. What would the facade be facing the track on the deck? Would it be identical to the other side, or?
No, actually, the facade along trackside is basically has a series of columns, and it'll be a sloped with spandrel panels. It won't be like a, which I believe is in the booklet.
Okay.
It's somewhat more of a garage look
Right.
than the other three elevations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So-
Okay.
Yeah.
How many spaces are there currently in the parking lot?
670, plus or minus?
750?
750 new, correct.
And do you know how many current residential commuter spaces there are currently?
Within the parking garage?
From Metuchen commuters?
About 320.
Three.
That's for Pearl and Halsey.
Just for Pearl, you
Pearl,
know?
yeah, I think it's like 220.
And do you know how many Metuchen commuter spaces there will be in the garage, reserved for monthlies?
I think actually what's going to happen is that because the different rate structures.
I'm sorry, is anybody able to pick up that?
You need to come forward and speak on the microphone.
But that has to be determined. Basically, what we'll do, we have our rate structure set up. So we're working with the parking authority, because the parking authority will provide a resident parking in their surface lots. We have a rate structure set up for the garage. And if a resident wants to park in the garage, they're more welcome to park in the garage.
Okay, but do you have any idea of the numbers, or how much it's going to cost a resident?
It's $7. We perform with $7 a day.
Okay, what about a monthly cost?
I think 110.
Okay, roughly what it is now.
Yep.
And you know how many spaces there will be reserved for Metuchen?
Basically, what happens is that we will allocate the number of spaces based on the usage. So whether comparing with the number of apartment dwellers as well as the number of open space, the number of dailies. So we don't know that number.
I think that, Jim, are you going to make Metuchen residents a priority if they want to be in the garage? Is that the question?
I think it
That's
is.
basically what it is.
I think it is.
Yeah, if a Metuchen resident wants to park in the garage, they'll get in the
They
garage.
get first place.
Okay. Jim, you wanted to ask a question? I saw you before.
There was
earlier.
one question about the capacity of the bike storage in the garage and how that would relate to the potential demand from the apartment residents.
Jim, we haven't quite laid that out yet. We've identified the area, but I guess, we're going to design that according to, the requirements. That's what I would say right now. We've identified the area, but we have to determine how many and what size that is.
Well, I can tell you that the planner is an ardent biker, and the number of biking spaces is a priority for him. So
Yeah.
I know we don't want to reduce any on-site parking, but to the extent that we could maximize bike accessibility and number of spaces, I think he would be pleased.
Yeah.
How is that going to be determined?
Yeah.
By whom?
Well, I don't think it's a personal whim, is it? I mean, Woodmont's residents have access to the Middlesex Greenway, so it's an asset for them to have bike storage, because
That's what I'm
it's a
asking.
lifestyle choice that they can offer here that you can't get in Hoboken.
Right. Who is it proposed by the applicant that's going to determine how many bike spaces there are?
Woodmont.
Okay. What if, What if the board doesn't think that it wants Woodmont to make that determination by itself?
I would like Woodmont to work with our planner on that and coming up with a viable number that would, you know, accommodate the residents and any bicycle riders that would come to the train station.
Yeah, well, they will ride they will
Yeah,
park
I
their
know
bikes at
some
the
will,
station.
but some may say, you know what, I'm going to...
Yep. I think it's more an issue of making sure there's enough for the residents and that there's maybe some expansion potential when they get to the design.
It's a great point, and we're wrestling with this at all of our communities, bike lockers, trying to find some space for those. We're also investigating a bike share program for all of our communities, like Woodmont Bike, like City Bike.
It gets messy with the hallways, though.
So we're looking at just buying 50 bikes and putting them all in our communities, give all of our residents a combination and see what happens. So there's some 501c3s, trans options, and those types of companies that do that. So we're trying to work. We agree 100% with Mr. Costa. We think it's definitely a way, particularly of a millennial resident, which we're going to see a strong percentage of.
Very good. Jim, other questions, or you want to follow up on that at all?
That was it on this.
Okay.
Can I just ask?
Board members
one-
keep asking, that's the whole point.
Yeah, no, I guess, not that we need any more specific testimony, but I would like a statement that the garage is going to be aesthetically complementing your residential and retail uses, because I think everyone will agree that many parking garages are, if not unsightly, certainly not complementary to surrounding development. I just want to make sure that that's not going, that we're going to get top of the line in terms of what this parking garage is going to look like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, both from an exterior standpoint as well as an internal aesthetic standpoint. And we've been working closely with our TKL related to that, so we're on the same page with that.
Doesn't look like the rendering, Ellen's going to come make you pay. Other questions?
You mentioned bike locker. Are you proposing to have people pay to store their bikes there?
Well, I don't know that we've got there yet. Not that I was just laughing about that.
Well, even in its current form, were you predicting to?
No, I don't think there was
Okay.
anything about that, but if we actually go and purchase metal bike lockers, find a place for them, there might be some kind of charge, just if for no other reason, somebody doesn't just get one and not even put a bike in. So if you charge some nominal amount, at least then you know they're going to use the bike.
Okay. Another question?
Yes, it just came to me when you put up the rendering. Has there been given any thought to putting some sort of softening landscaping on the side that's sort of a solid wall, the garage? You know, where I guess where the pergola,
Where the imprints are on the precast concrete.
couldn't something grow up on there, Jim, or,
That's good.
like we soften fences or
Yeah.
other large walls in town,
Or similar to the sportsplex where we have the trellis going up with the greenery going.
Because I'm thinking that's a beautiful picture, but if that green weren't green all year, or weren't, it might just soften that large stretch of
Yeah, this doesn't,
concrete.
just to address that, this doesn't depict it exactly the way, we've been working with Jim pretty closely about trying to create kind of a window look with, with going into the concrete there. A little better than what's shown there. We were showing some columns separating them. We're skinning up the window. So it's still a little bit of a work in progress to try and get those to look as good as we possibly can with a concrete wall, with various sandblasting methods, with coloration and things like that to tie in as best we can. So, yeah, we understand that's very important. It's one of the areas that's going to be exposed. It's going to be right up
You're going
against
to
the
be
apartments.
looking at it from the piazza. I mean, it's
Yes.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
exciting, but I just thought that
So
one
we're very
stand-
sensitive to that, and we're working closely with Jim in terms of that final design.
I think have you done anything with landscaping in this climate? either?
I mean, on a solid wall, I'm not sure.
Ivy? Ivy or?
to explore. I mean, that's a good point.
You mean drop something
You're
down
looking up
off
at a
the,
sort of a
off
white
the
screen, you
roof?
can
It could come
project a movie
down,
on it.
Seattle, in Seattle, a lot of times you see the drop-down
Yeah.
condition, which
It
makes
is the north side, so we'll have to be a little bit.
English ivy. We can go look at the Sportsplex and see, it's the,
Yeah, that's why I suggested,
We'll work
and
with
it's
Jim on
filling
that.
in now.
it's
so-
filling in, yeah, the
maybe
Sportsplex is
even-
filling in, and you can really, and it's different north and east, it's English ivy, it's Boston ivy on the south and west there. Go see.
We'll work with Jim on that.
Or considering a trompe l'oeil, something that
I was gonna say, yeah.
will give a
Impression
visual.
of a few window boxes there, Keith, would really draw the line from the,
Interesting.
Okay.
create the illusion Ellen's looking for.
Good suggestion. What other questions do we have from the board members? Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public now. If you have questions regarding the parking garage design, or I guess questions relative to Nexus's operation, even though it isn't necessarily in our purview, you can come forward and ask them now.
I thought I wasn't going to have to come up. 11:30, bike parking, we got there, Jim. If you have not already, since Mr. Santola is going to be making the call on the bike parking, you have to share the Tim Haas study on best practices in parking deck design and construction, and one of the bullets on there is make sure there's sufficient bike parking, obviously. I think Jim Zola presented it at Revolution or something like that a couple years ago.
that's right.
So there's good stuff in there. Have you worked with or utilized in other projects the wall-mounted bike locking systems? I think it's Interbay, maybe they're using up in Jersey City and Hoboken. Have you seen those?
We have,
Okay.
yeah, I believe we've implemented that in Union Station down in
Okay.
DC.
So that might be something that we could explore for here?
Quite possible.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, especially at the ground tier. I mean, you have, that, at the ground tier, that is a solid, we basically indicated, this thing died, but in the vicinity of that northwest corner.
Sure.
Where we have the allocated the bike storage, I mean, that is a solid wall in that location, so it would be a combination of the two, so, yeah.
I don't know if you noticed the bike.
And as far as folks, obviously, we spoke when we were talking about the landscape design earlier, that we know we'll have some bike racks along the piazza area for those that are riding up. But on days when you might need or desire protection or protected bike shelter or bike storage, would you anticipate there would be facilities available on the ground floor proximate to the retail there, so you could ride in, park your bike, and walk out one of those exits to the retail space?
That's something that we can definitely consider in that area, even if we split it up, yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, in the northwest corner, you're really accommodating the residents in that respect,
right,
right?
yeah, right.
And then in the northeast corner,
People that are riding in.
Exactly.
Right.
That's right.
And I think you've confirmed this before. I just want to, the parking for the customer, for the residential folks, it's unbundled, right? That's not, it's not all included in the rent, right? That's
No, it's a month.
It's a month-to-month, so it's a separate, right, it's an option. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other members of the public like to share their questions with us? Mr. Salmon?
Hey, Bill Salmon, 23 Bounty. I just want to revisit, I think I missed the parking counts. The current lot handles how many stalls?
670 plus or minus, is that, Mike, is that, is okay, 670?
And it runs at about a third capacity, is that, did I hear that right? At one-third capacity? Currently, what it operates at?
Pretty much full, yeah.
Full? Oh, okay. And then the required parking for the residents is approximately 2 per, I would guess, right? One,
No,
two.
the required parking for the residents is, in this type of community, is about 1, 2 to 1, 3 per unit.
Okay,
That's our internal counts. We have a reservation system where it guarantees a maximum number, and then based upon how, over time, we'll be able to hold that number down pretty close, work from there.
Okay, so if you didn't do a shared scenario, you did straight up, you're looking at roughly 900 stalls or so that would be required
For what?
for every resident to have a parking
I
stall?
just told you 1.2 per unit, so that 1.2, 1.3.
Call 300. call that 300. And then 600 for the commuters, right?
670, you mean existing?
Existing. I'm saying straight up, no shared parking scenario. So roughly 900 or so. Okay. And then I had a question, I think, for the operations. You mentioned 4 decks that you operate. Do they operate in a mixed-use scenario that you're talking about?
Yeah, two of the decks operate in a mixed use. One in Glassboro is actually probably very similar to this, where it provides monthly spaces for students in the garage. It has a Marriott hotel next door, so it provides accommodations for the guests of the Marriott, and it has 35,000 square feet of retail around it, so it also provides for the retail user. So that one's probably most closely related to this. We also have a deck in Trenton that accommodates office users as well as commuters, because it's next to the train station.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then I heard that commuters would seek other locations to park if they couldn't park here. I believe you said that. And where would they look to park?
The current locations for the park in this garden, basically what happens, like I said, we'll work collaboratively with them to look at any other locations that they have spaces available. So, for example, if there's a day that we know is full, and they have, example, there's spaces available at Halsey, we direct them there.
Right, okay. I'm just concerned about not having capacity in both lots and people using the adjoining residential neighborhood to seek out parking spaces. And I don't know if this question is meant for you. Can you talk about distribution and queuing and how the commuters get in and out of here? With regard to, are 50% going to go out Pearl? Is 50 going to go out New? Or is it some other, I don't know if that's the traffic, we're going to have traffic testimony?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it, thanks. Appreciate it. Very good testimony.
Okay, other members of the public?
Mark Hersberg, 24 Clinton Place in Metuchen. Was the installation of solar panels, such as the Nexus lot in Trenton, looked at as a possibility here?
I mean, we always take a look at that. We've installed solar panels on 3 of our parking garages. There's an economic analysis when you go through installing solar panels. As we all know, in New Jersey in 2009, 10, it was very lucrative to do that because of the way the economics work with the SRECs and things like that. Those numbers came down considerably. It's become a little bit more difficult to do it, but we still examine that on an ongoing basis. And it's not, we can always come back at any time and do it, which we've done on those other decks. They were built already, because we use a steel canopy system that we would put over on the roof and then align the solar panels on top. So yeah, we constantly look at that on all of our, we just finished the Glassboro deck a year ago. We didn't put panels on right away, but we're just evaluating that now as well.
Thank you. Okay. Other members of the public? Here we go. Please.
Nelson Lee, 16 Bounty Street. A question about the interim parking plan. I guess now there's, the current lot accommodates a combination of ticket holders who are Metuchen residents and people from out of town. And then I think in the future, we're considering reducing the number of people who have out of towners who are ticket holders. So during the, am I right so far?
Yes.
So in this transition plan, what are we going to do with out-of-town park? Is our transition plan going to accommodate the out-of-town ticket holders?
Of course, accommodate the residents first. All right, and then basically what it'll do is then we look to accommodate the out-of-towners. If there's no space, like I said, the biggest thing is what we're trying to do is on the interim parking plan, if we can offer some off-site locations. A lot of times people will find other locations, so they might not come back, which make it easier to allocate the out-of-towners as well as your resident parking.
What are the ideas for phasing out of town ticket holders? Be like a door shut kind of thing and say as of this date we're not going to, or it's kind of like not renew their tickets, or has that even been discussed?
Yeah, we'll work with the parking authority on that. I mean, remember, they've had them for many years. So basically what happens is, to me, and as well as working with authority, there'll be a transition stage, you know. The interim parking will help transition that a little bit better for us. But like I said, it's typically a transition stage to let the customers know that these are the spaces available. And if they're not available, understood is that there's other locations that could be available.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion, and we are rounding midnight. So, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to come back tomorrow evening before the board without any further notice, not that we would have much time to do that, but I'd also like the board to consider releasing two of our witnesses, Mr. Campbell and Mr. Carmen, both of whom were questioned by the board as well as the public. Mr. Campbell in particular has a plane back to Chicago tomorrow. I'd rather not have to bring him back. If possible, we'll have our site engineer here, we'll have a representative from Nexus here again, and for our case in chief, the board will hear from our traffic engineer as well as our planner.
I understand. Council, do you have any objections to that?
No, unless, obviously, if the board members have any other
Board members?
questions they want to ask either of those witnesses that they've thought of in the interim, now would be the
Yes.
time while they're here.
Well said. Doesn't look like we have any, so I guess we're good. So, other than that, I'm going to say we're going to re-adjourn tomorrow. The meeting will be adjourned after we have a motion and a second.
I move
Why
to
don't we,
adjourn.
let me make the announcement first, then, that this
Okay.
hearing will resume tomorrow evening at 7:30 in this room. There won't be any further notice, and that's about it.
Okay.
I believe Sharon said we could leave all of our materials, that we don't have to take them back and forth, which would be, I think, for the board would be a good thing.
Is there a motion to
I
adjourn?
move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.